Alrighty. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, whereas tonight we are continuing to, shall I say, celebrate our being online for 5 years. And tonight is kind of special because it starts Dane Kyle's month here to show us some of the films inside his deep recesses of his mind. So why don't you, Dane, tell us what movie we are beginning on your special month here?
Yeah, my birthday month. And yes, the deep recesses of my mind is a very scary place to be, I'll have you know. But yeah, good to be back for this most auspicious occasion where during the month of October we will be discussing the Rocky movies and specifically 1 through 6 because those are the ones where Rocky Balboa is the protagonist and we'll be able to see where his character goes and how the series evolved, how the world evolved over the course in which the films were made, and also how the films themselves evolved. Because as we get to Rocky 1 here, it was a little indie movie that could. It was made very inexpensively, had pretty much no big names outside of Burgess Meredith, and yet it went on to win Best Film Editing, Best Director, and Best Picture. So the film itself is as much of an underdog story as the character is. But before we dive into that, just a few, little summaries of the very, very, very basic plot is you have Rocky Balboa as a washed up 30-year-old boxer who's going nowhere in his life and gets the once in a lifetime chance to fight the world heavyweight champion of the world on the bicentennial, which was a big deal, 1976, and to get a shot at the title because that's the American dream. And Rocky knows, of course, that he may indeed not make it all the way, and that's not really the point. The point is to go the distance, to go the full 15 rounds, so that way he can show that he's not just another bum from the neighborhood. But that's the basic story in a nutshell, but we're going to get everybody's first impressions before we dive into it too further. So going around the room, let's go left to right. Brandon, actually, here's a better question. Was this anybody's first time seeing Rocky? I should hope not. If not, Brandon,
wasn't it Jake's first time? Jake, it wasn't your first time watching Rocky?
I'd
all the
rather
way
hear
through?
from someone's first time, any first timers, if we have them. Do we have any first timers? Because if not, I'll go to Brandon. All right,
No.
Brandon.
He might not be back here, but I think it was his first time.
Okay. Well, Brandon, anyway.
Did that not come through?
Oh, there you go.
There you
it was
are.
your
Okay.
first time, right? With Rocky?
No.
All the way through?
No, it was my second.
Yeah, I didn't.
Oh,
I,
it's
I
the
didn't think
second
there
one that
were
was the
any.
first time.
I
Never
watched
mind.
one, I believe, but I don't think I saw any past the first one.
Okay. Yeah, I figured almost everybody had seen the first one at least once. But let's start with Brandon. Impressions?
I saw this thing back when I was a little kid. My father was a big boxing fanatic. He even did Golden Gloves for a while himself, and so I got to see a lot of boxing growing up. And Rocky was one of his favorites. He considered the others more guilty pleasure movies, but he really liked Rocky because he felt a lot of kinship with that, with the character, with how he lived out there, with just that general setting. And I'll admit, I really do have a special place for Rocky in my heart above all of them. 4 is my guilty pleasure movie, but if I was to be plain about it, 1 would be my favorite. I like kind of, though it is an underdog story, I like just the in general kind of reality of it. and there is a realness to it that kind of is escaping the others. And the ending to me, when I was a kid, I wanted to see him win. I mean, I think everybody as a kid would have wanted to see him win, but as an adult, I think that having him not win, spoilers for a pretty old movie.
Yeah, well, I already kind of said, but still.
Yeah, still,
Yeah.
it's but to me, I really thought the ending was great. I do think that it deserved its win that it got, and truly, it is one of the few films I consider a near masterpiece in time.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Jake, what about you? I'm guessing not your first time. Similar history?
No, not at all. I am relatively new to this. In high school, in choir, sometimes when we'd have downtime, they'd put movies on, and I distinctly remember the Rocky movies being played. I want to say it was 4, but that was like my first exposure to Rocky, but I barely even watched it then. Uh, I never actually saw the first one until I want to say it was either when I was in college or very shortly after. So probably around 20. Yeah, I did not like where that sentence was going, but probably close to 20 years ago. And I feel like I've probably seen it once in the interim. And then I saw it, the other night. So probably about 3 times total. I have an odd relationship with boxing and movies, and generally, I couldn't give 2 shits about boxing. But I like the movies. But of the many I've seen at this point, over a dozen, probably going on 2 dozen boxing themed films, especially if you count ones like Pulp Fiction, where boxing is a component of the film. But definitely there are several big ones: Million Dollar Baby, Girl Fight, Brandon's favorite, Schusterman Levine. All these boxing films that I've seen at this point. And Rocky just didn't hit me the way a lot of the others did, but it has grown on me. Like with repeat viewings, I usually find I found a lot more to like this time around, I think. There's still parts of it that I'm underwhelmed by, and parts of it that just straight up I don't think aged well. I've always been a little iffy on the start of Rocky and Adrian's relationship. It's kind of it feels off to me. So maybe as we get into the discussion, we'll get more on that. But
Yeah, I want to
I
hear
don't.
that. I'm interested.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that before.
and yeah,
It was a
and
rocky
also I
start.
just
Yeah,
Oh, I
indeed it was.
definitely see it and I understand it, but yeah,
Well,
yeah,
definitely
let's
get to what to talk
definitely get
later.
into that once it's
right.
time, because yeah, I'm curious where that's gonna go. I mean, just very
Okay,
quickly on one of the points you said.
yeah.
I think you'd agree that this is a boxing movie that isn't really about the boxing. Yeah, the boxing's pretty ancillary. It's kind of a means to an end.
Well, and this is one of the things I find fascinating about some of the ones I mentioned. Again, yeah, like Million Dollar Baby and Girl Fight, and I didn't even mention Raging Bull. That's the other, the one everyone thinks of. Um, I think most of the good boxing films I've seen are character studies, and they do a good job. It's a really good format for doing a character study, I think. Like I said, I haven't seen some of the Rocky sequels. So, and I should also mention that I have indeed seen both of the Creed movies and very much enjoyed them. I've very much enjoyed the Creed movies, and I enjoyed the trajectory of Rocky taking on a protege and that sort of thing. I thought it was very well done.
That's not how
But
Creed spoilers. I haven't
yeah.
seen them.
Oh well. Well,
Yeah,
we're not. You've got time to watch them before we cover them.
Yeah.
Creed.
I mean, the bulk of the discussion is the first six,
Right.
just because that is the end of Rocky as a protagonist.
Right.
But yeah, Creed is like extra credit viewing.
But I will say, I guess overall, to sum it up, my main thing is that Rocky is one of the most beloved films of the 70s and arguably one of the most beloved sports films. And it may be one of the most beloved overall. And so for me, the first viewing, I was left deflated. Like, my God, that movie was overrated. But I think that's one of the reasons why I think that's one of the reasons why it grows on me with repeat viewing. Because once you reset that bar to a more realistic expectation, you're able to enjoy it more. And that's, I feel like this one is doing that. So, I'm looking forward to watching the whole series. I'm really, really PO'd right now that I couldn't get the second one watched because of stupid. I'm just going to leave that outside, be done with it. And apologies for my sound issues if there are any, because I'm having to use my cell phone because my computer is a piece of shite. But
you sound fine.
Yeah, okay, that's good. But yeah, I am definitely looking forward to watching the others and find because those will be first time. 2, 3, probably most of 4, 5, and 6 will be first time for me. So
Well, that's gonna
looking
be
forward
fascinating.
to it.
Yeah, you're gonna be a guinea
Yep.
pig, I think. And you can do a makeup test, for makeup exam, for Rocky
Right.
2. All right, let's see. So Tammy, what's your history with Rocky, the first one?
I know I've watched it. It was a long time ago. Because to be honest, I'm not really into boxing movies, you know. But yeah, it was, it was hyped up, it was, guys love to watch the movies. So, I always ended up watching. That's how I'm sure I ended up watching it to begin with. I don't really remember much of 2 until I watched it for this. I don't think I watched any of the rest of them, so I'll be new to them too.
Nice.
So,
We'll get some virgins in the series here. I like it.
I mean, if I did watch any of the other ones, it would have been like bits and pieces. I don't remember anything. I thought it was pretty good. I I didn't really remember much of it from before rewatching it, so of course I thought it was just going to be completely about boxing, and it was just going to be like, oh great, But no, it wasn't. There was quite a storyline there, and of course the boxing was part of it, but you really did have quite a storyline that it wasn't all boxing and that's it. So yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was very like down to earth about how things probably were in that area at the time and how people were, and what the life was probably like at that time for somebody that chose that as a profession. So it was interesting. So
Good to know. Similar story, Dave, or had you seen the first movie before multiple times, or what's your history with Rocky?
Well, I saw the film. I saw the film for first time back when I was a kid, and I've definitely seen it definitely more than probably 3 times because my dad was a fan of the series. So oftentimes when it was on TNT or any of the other ones were on, um, we'd watch them. I know that 3 I'm a little blurry on, and 5 I'm a little blurry on, and I know that Rocky Balboa I've seen once. But I remember seeing at least 1, 2, and 4 at least more than a couple of times. But I have also seen a ton of other films that involve Stallone over time, and I like Stallone as an actor. I mean, he wasn't as flashy as Schwarzenegger was, his contender. He was like the other Titan, in his field. Stallone might have been in muscle magazines, but he wasn't as what is it, protagonistic as Schwarzenegger was. Schwarzenegger, I swear, he at least masturbated to his own magazines. But yeah,
Van Damme and Norris were way better than both of them.
But, Stallone, I believe whenever he comes to a role, he brings a lot of character, and even though he's kind of like this broken English Italian here in this film. I mean, my first impression of him was, he was a down on his luck dude who, a lot of shit was thrown at him, and he was kind of like the underdog, So, in fact, he was the underdog, but still he was, stepped aside on and stuff. And as I saw it, and after this rewatch, I understood a lot more into his character, and where his beginnings came from, So
Well, yeah, this really was his star-making role, and also it's worth noting that he wrote the script for Rocky, and in fact, Rocky really is his franchise from the beginning. Not because he directed almost all of the films, not this one and not the 5th one, but this really is his baby in terms of acting, in terms of screenwriting, in terms of mostly directing. And in many ways, it has been kind of a metaphor for his own career progression. But obviously, we'll get into that later. But yeah, it is very important to to see where Stallone came from, because this really is kind of his own cinematic beginnings as well.
And listening to Jake a little bit about the relationship between him and Adrian, well, it is kind of, the whole, okay, his friend is Paulie from this meatpacking place, and he basically sets his sister up on a date, that she didn't want, it's Thanksgiving holiday, and she's cooked a turkey and everything, and he
You want the bird? Go in the alley and eat the bird. Oh,
isn't it great how he takes the big leg?
You hungry,
the rest away, though?
Like,
wow,
what an asshole.
That's one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, actually.
He's kind of an asshole for that, you know what I mean?
Oh, he totally is, but we'll get there. We should keep it moving though. Crawl.
But I enjoyed.
Yeah, go ahead.
I enjoyed the rewatch, and I enjoyed the performance, and you really get to see like a lot of what went into to this, because the whole reason why he even got a fight was because Apollo called him out,
Well, he pulled his name out of a book.
He liked his name.
He liked the name.
Well, one could even say that the film itself, getting its stuff was technically Rocky. I mean, was Sylvester Stallone's. big shot that he also got. So that was also kind of a metaphor in itself because
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into the
Yeah.
ties. We're gonna see the parallels between Rocky himself and Stallone throughout our discussion of the series because there are a lot of parallels to make. Now, Kroll, what's your history with Rocky?
Okay, so I watched it. I'm guessing when I was a kid. I don't remember exactly when. My mother wasn't into boxing, so I don't know. Maybe she might have put it on, or I just started somewhere. I don't know. I know I remember seeing it, and I remember seeing the second one, and I was never into boxing. I liked wrestling. I was like 12 and stuff. But like everyone said, it's not just a boxing movie. It's not really a boxing movie. It's just a big inspirational movie, really. He no matter what, he keeps trying. No matter how hard, he just keeps pushing. He meets her, he wants her, and he gets to go out with her. And you can't tell that she liked him at first, but I guess she does, and he keeps at it. He's persistent with relationships. He's persistent with his career. I mean, he was 30, getting much older, and a lot of people would have given up boxing by then. If you haven't made it by then, you're not gonna. And he just kept going because he loved it, and he's like he says, he's not the brightest, but he's definitely determined, and it's very inspirational story. Even if you can't relate to the boxing part of it, just relate to the rest of it, I think. So maybe as a kid I didn't really see that as much, so I wasn't really into it that much. But you know, over the years, I'm watching all the other Rocky movies, and getting older. Being older when I started watching them and stuff. I uh, I got the metaphors. I got what it meant, and the movie was better this time than the first time. I have not seen it since. I didn't. I watched them and that was it. Just the one times. But yeah, I definitely feel like the second movie is way better.
That's interesting. We'll definitely have to explore that
And
as
the
we get
third
going.
movie is my favorite.
Oh, really? Well, then we'll really have to
Wrestling
explore
fan.
that.
Wrestling fan.
Okay, well, we got a decent spread of opinion and experience here, which is good because I know for myself it's a little bit more traditional than that in the sense that so I saw them for I saw 1 through 4 like right in a row on TV, AMC, when they used to show the marathon of them. Saw it when I was like 11, and the first one, absolutely loved it. Was hooked the entire time, couldn't get enough of it. And then again, they'd lead off into each other so well. That's part of the majesty of the series. But I'm gonna save my feelings on the other ones until we get there. But just for the first one, absolutely loved it. Riveted the entire way. I loved the characters. I loved the script. I got what Stallone was going for, which was the idea of boxing as a metaphor for life, and how a lot of he said that the theme of the movie was unrealized dreams, and how a lot of people feel unfulfilled because they didn't get that one shot at that one chance at greatness, and the feeling like our lives kind of crystallize in a certain moment, and we hit that, if we're lucky, we can hit that apex of meaning and fulfillment and everything like that. But that so many people don't get that shot, and this is a chance, someone who, gets that shot and is able to take it and run with it. But he also is enough of a realist to know that, that he's not going to win, but it's not really about winning. The winning is more of a moral victory in the sense of proving to others and especially to himself that he's not just another bum from the neighborhood. Um, But yeah, absolutely love this film, love the series, and it only gets better with time. I've seen this movie so many times; it never gets old for me. It's one of my favorite movies, and I mean, Network, I think, won script that year, and I mean that's a phenomenal screenplay too. I mean that one, Taxi Driver, and this film, some of the best films ever made, all in the same year, and you really are kind of splitting hairs at that point. But this is a phenomenal script. Stallone is often, remembered as being an action hero and kind of, he was known for being Rocky, because very inimitable. Yeah, everybody, you just gotta say that, and everybody knows who you're talking about. But I mean, he was always much more than that. I mean, he was pretty well educated, well read, multi-talented guy, in front of and behind the camera. Never really, outside of the Rocky movies, never really even got as appreciated as he should be in terms of what all he's able to do. Um, but no, this really is where he got his start, and it shows because Stallone, he shopped the script around, and he said he would feel unfulfilled if he didn't star in it himself. And he, it wasn't going to be him originally. It was going to be like Robert Redford, or a lot of people were competing for it, but he said, I need to do this myself, and so they had to make it on the cheap, shoot with a lot of non-union crew in Philadelphia, which is where our dearly beloved Lloyd Kaufman from Troma actually comes into the story. He was location manager and played a pretty pivotal role in getting this movie made the way that it was, which is pretty impressive. He also played the drunk that Rocky carries into the bar, which is really cool. A little fun fact there. But yeah, this movie really was made on the cheap, but it just works, I think, for the grit. You see grit in this film that you don't see in the other ones. Um, but speaking of grit, that normally I don't really like to do a play by play, but like this is one where I think the themes kind of get realized as the story progresses. But like in terms of grit, the opening fight scene there is in a church, uh and you see it's just absolutely run down. He's fighting, Rocky is essentially a bum in the beginning, and he's fighting Spider Rico. He's a bum. You think everybody I fight is a bum? Well, ain't they? You got heart, but you fight like a goddamn ape. That whole thing. And he's, in other words, he's essentially wasting his gifts. You had the talent to become a good fighter, and instead of that, you became a lane breaker, some cheap second-rate loan shark. To live it, it's a waste of life. That's where Rocky is at that point, and you see it.
You want the truth?
What? Oh yeah. I've been coming here for 6 years. In 6 years, you've been sticking it to me. I want to know how come. You don't want to know. That whole. Again, I could just do the whole movie. I mean, every line is just so well written. But like, yeah, that's where he is at this juncture, and you see it pretty clearly. He's fighting in I learned this later. The nickname for that ring, for that initial ring, is the bucket of blood, which I didn't know. But yeah, he's fighting in this awful place, to these 2-bit boxers making crap money, walking home, no car, in this awful neighborhood, which I seriously wonder how much better Philadelphia looks now than it did then. Probably not much. It could be worse for all I know. But yeah, he's really, 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 really down on his luck. And
Yeah.
what's absolutely magnificent about Stallone's acting and the writing is how much there are certain scenes, like you had the talent to become a good fighter, all that stuff, or like the not just another bum from the neighborhood. There are certain scenes where it's pretty clear, but for the most part, I think there's just a lot of great subtext, because like he can say something as small, like to the turtles, he's like, if I could sing and dance, I wouldn't be doing this. And it's just little things like that that reveal so much about the character without having to be too overt about it. But you were gonna say something, Brandon?
I was going to say it does lose at least 1 point because at no point did they have a Philly cheesesteak
That's
in that
true.
entire movie. And actually, they had multiple movies. They had
Yeah.
many movies to get that cheesesteak in, and they did not get one in just once. I
That's
think it's a
true.
conspiracy.
What's up with that?
That is true. That is a lost opportunity. Not sure if we have any Philadelphia natives around here that can rectify that or whatever, but we do have a certain Mo who has entered the chat.
Yeah.
Tell us your experiences with Rocky while we're still relatively early in the proceedings.
I couldn't swear to you the first time that I saw Rocky. I was thinking about that a bunch earlier, actually. Like, I don't. They're kind of like the James Bond movies, I guess, where they've just always been around, you know? Probably my dad showed them to me as a kid. First Rocky I used to think was real boring as a child, but yeah, I've since came
Right.
to appreciate it probably more than all the other movies, just for its, you know, the story behind it being made and how it perfectly sets up all the characters for the rest of the series. I also really like the idea of a sports movie where no one really wins. You know, it's pretty unique in that aspect. It's more the story of the fight and less about who wins or loses. That comes more in the second movie, obviously. But it's just great. It's inspiring, kick-ass soundtrack, pretty much a perfect cast. And it's just got this scrappy kind of, I don't want to say low budget because you know most of us in here typically mean something else when we say that, but it's got a very sort of DIY gritty sort of feel to it that the other movies don't have that I really like. So that's about it. It's just a sweaty good time, man.
That it is. And yeah, this definitely was like maybe $900,000, which was cheap at the time and still is by studio standards. And
Right.
United Artists was, you know, still kind of a what the equivalent of like an indie studio, more or less. You know, so I mean, it does have a grit that the others don't have. It's got, you know, a sense of its roots and where it comes from. It really does feel like, you know, not a Hollywood movie. And for the most part, it really kind of wasn't, you know, because they did try to film in Philadelphia as much as possible. They did some interior shooting in LA, like the interior of the bar was LA, but the exteriors for sure are Philly, and very, very, very demonstrably so because they look absolutely run down and terrible. You know, 'cause Rocky lives in this awful neighborhood, and you know, um,
And it's got direct connections too,
Looks
like
just
the
like
low
neighborhoods I
budget
lived
scene,
in.
you know, with the whole Lloyd Kaufman connection
yeah,
and Joe Spinell's up
Right.
in there. So it's
oh
got a bit of
yeah,
that like low budget, scrappy DIY and right in its DNA, even if it is like, you know, bigger than maybe their other projects, you know.
yeah. We're definitely gonna get to Joe Spinell as possibly the most underrated character in the series as
I think I
Gazzo,
would
but
agree. Him and the
we'll get.
Robot Man.
Yeah, we're gonna get to all those things, but I mean, just in that opening scene with Rocky and him coming home, we learn so much about the character already in terms of, you know, you see that he's not really the greatest boxer. Like his biggest strength is that he can take a lot of abuse and not get knocked down, and then he usually comes back swinging and is
Like
able to knock
Marciano.
down the opponent. Yeah, yeah, he's able to knock down the opponents. After having taken a lot of abuse, like he doesn't guard his face nearly to the degree that he should.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a
yeah,
big
but
old meat cushion.
yeah, but that is also part of the metaphor of the character is that he gets knocked down a lot by life or battered by life, but he refuses to let himself be knocked down and he can come back swinging. And that really is
Yep.
so in that opening scene, we already learn a lot about the character through behavior, and that's of course character is revealed through behavior. And you know, so much of his character is revealed through what is not said, because obviously Rocky's not the most articulate fellow in the world, you know.
Right.
Yeah, it was nice.
And
It was cool when you know, the guy headbutted his eye, and
Oh yeah.
he just went ape. Like
Yeah,
he literally went ape and just fucking just demolished him.
for
You
sure.
know? That was the ending. That was the end for the other guy.
Isn't
You find it.
Spider Rico?
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I'll admit one of the reasons why I kind of with what Dane was just talking about, like development through action and without necessarily saying a whole lot. Part of that comes down to acting, and I would say this film is well acted. Some
yeah.
of them very, very much so, and when we'll get to those, I'm sure as we come along. Not the least of which Stallone. It was in a partially autobiographical role, so he did invest a lot of himself, which
Yeah.
probably made the role easier to play, but not necessarily. One could be playing themselves and have no sense of presence on camera or whatever, but like, Stallone definitely knows how to be in front of a camera, so that gave him, that's some acting there. But to backtrack to the whole idea of showing a lot without really necessarily having everyone be incredibly verbose and saying all this stuff, and I really underrated this film a little bit when I first saw it as a screenplay contender. I was like, this was up for best screenplay, but like I said, on repeat viewings, that is something that I appreciate, because the screenplay is not just the words that are coming out of their mouth, it's all kinds of other stuff too. And
It's structure too. It's very well
yes.
structured. Like this is a
Yeah.
great film to watch for proper cinematic structure, because this is like it clocks in
Right.
like pretty much perfectly at 2 hours. It hits all the correct beats
Right.
that you would expect it to hit when they need to hit, and again,
Well,
there's just a lot of good subtext.
Of course, part of that also comes down to the impact of the director and producers as well. But there were two fun bits of trivia that I wanted to mention that are tied into this, and one was that the director of John J. Avildsen has gone on record saying that he could care less about boxing and had never watched a movie or a boxing match.
Yeah. Scorsese
the-
too with Raging Bull.
Right. But he supposedly was sold on the script when he got to the scene of Rocky talking to his turtles. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I love that the turtles sold the script. I think that's
Yeah.
great.
Oh yeah. Well, and to
You
tie that
mentioned
back into
the Oscar
that-
nod for the friggin' robot, but Cuff and Link should have got some Oscar nods, man. They played
Right.
turtles.
Yeah.
Supposedly,
Yeah, they
they were still alive at least 2 years ago, and he still owns them.
wow.
Well, turtles live a long time.
Right.
Actually,
Well, that they do.
Yeah, don't we
wanted
know
to-
that? We have one.
Well, and
I
to,
wanted-
to tie it back into
The other-
Trauma a little bit, John G. Avildsen directed Cry Uncle
Ah,
for and that's part of what made him think of Lloyd Kaufman for
ah.
location manager, and then also tying it in with Turtles. Kevin Eastman of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a big Trauma fan, so there you go. Ties it all in.
I mean,
What were you gonna
Right.
say,
And then
Brandon?
the
What
other
were you
one I
saying,
wanted to
Brandon?
mention.
Hold on, guys.
Oh.
Brandon's
Yeah,
been trying to say
Brandon
something
had
for a
something.
couple
Go ahead.
I mean, the one things I've been wanting to say about is the setting itself. It tells
Yeah.
so much of the story, because you got Rocky's apartment. You can see the various posters. You've got the Rocky Marciano, which they point out. Mickey points out later, but you can see it if you know anything about boxing. You can see that like right up there. But also just in general, even the background characters, the priest that he talks to at the Catholic Church that helps set up the fights there, or the guy sitting around the burning trash can,
Yeah,
singing
Frank
the songs.
Stallone.
It's just a great in general. It's just an amazing way that they set it up, because a lot of it tells the story just by looking at it and seeing the surroundings, which I think is a great thing.
Oh, for
yeah,
sure.
and it's
It's
a
a
great
good thing.
story about I guess like an impoverished part of a city that really needed a hero to sort of rally behind, and Rocky kind of becomes that, which is in itself pretty inspiring.
Oh, definitely.
Can do
Well,
a lot to raise the morale in a neighborhood like that if you've got like this local underdog turned legend that you can all rally behind and put up statues outside of the neighborhood for.
Well, and
Right.
before we get too far down the rabbit hole of plot, we should just briefly establish the historical context in which why it made an impact, and why the setting of Philadelphia in particular is so impactful, because Philadelphia really is like a secondary character in the story, because Philadelphia, hugely important city in the history of the United States. Yeah, as important as Washington D.C. in many ways, and obviously a city that was, and I think in a lot of ways still is, kind of down on its luck economically and culturally and everything. I mean, it's got its good parts, its bad parts, but the neighborhood in which Rocky finds himself is very run down. And also America itself in the mid 70s was feeling very demoralized, and you look at
Mhm.
films like Taxi Driver and Network in comparison, they were very jaded, very post Watergate, very
Right.
America's in decline, that kind of stuff. And then you look at Rocky, and it doesn't lie about that either, but it also says, that it's basically, it was a call for America to kind of rediscover itself. And that's part of why, you've got Rocky, who's, son of immigrant parents. He's poor, he's ill-educated, but he's got spirit, he's got heart, he's got an indomitable spirit, and he gets this chance on the country's biggest birthday, as Apollo Creed says. And he's able to, it's the whole idea of, do you believe America is the land of opportunity? And it's that spirit, the spirit of 76, quite literally, uh that is running throughout this film. And I think that's part of what made it have such a big audience response at the time. But it's also not, doesn't use that as a crutch either, because this is a universal story. It really hasn't aged in the same way as you might expect, because the themes are so universal. And in
Yep.
fact,
Right.
in the behind the scenes, Stallone has said that, people outside of the United States, they just kind of instinctively know the Rocky character. They know that archetype. We'll get into archetypes a little bit later as we get into character more, but that's just some, historical context there. Someone
Well,
was going to
another
say
note
something.
about Philadelphia, of course, being the city of brotherly love, which makes it kind of an interesting idea to have this boxing fable, because it's such a pugilistic sport. So the idea of
Mhm.
setting it in the city of brotherly love is kind of a fun little thing there.
For sure.
But another thing, and you're right about the historical context, because this was like, this was the 70s. Yeah, there were some dark films that were dominating the
Very much so.
Cineplexes then. And of course, that's probably part of the reason why Star Wars took off the way it did the next year. But
Yeah.
the one bit of history made by the film that I found kind of fascinating. This is as of 2015. I don't know if it's changed since then, but I don't think it has. It's the only film? Is Sylvester Stallone is ranks with Charles Chaplin as the only person to have been the sole writer of an original screenplay, starred in the same film, and gotten Oscar nods for both.
Yeah,
And
Stallone is in unique company, I
yeah,
have to say. People
yeah,
like to kind of badmouth him, but he's a pretty unique person
yeah.
and a very
So that
accomplished
shows some
one,
skill there.
for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's the setting in which we find ourselves. Philadelphia really is such a character in this film alongside Rocky Balboa himself. But Rocky has kind of this certain walk. He's got a certain speech pattern that really, Stallone said, that he's a character who is so misrepresented. The outside does not match the inside. And getting into archetypes just a little bit, we all kind of instinctively know the fierce warrior who has a tender heart and who can hurt and who feels very deeply and yet is a ferocious fighter. That archetype is very universal, and Rocky definitely is it. But he also is a fundamentally decent person. because he's so uncomplicated. And that's something else that just has a universal appeal. We all just know that. And Stallone clearly believes in it because the character feels so authentic and so sincere and unpretentious. And that is reflected in his post fight interactions. So, it's like is the extent of his vocabulary basically, yeah, I did real good, you should have seen me, to the people, and everybody loves it. I mean, he's very much a neighborhood guy, except for Adrian, who he keeps trying to make inroads with, trying to tell bad jokes, trying to do his best to be charming, and she's very she has in many ways kind of the opposite problems that Rocky has, because she's someone who is too contained, too insular, too afraid of life. And I mean, I guess he is kind of in his own way, but like, she is someone who is used to being in the background, and she's kind of resigned herself to that fate. And this is a very tough looking guy, and a guy who tries to be tougher than he necessarily really is. But she has her own journey, and one of it is just kind of her getting out of her shell. And I think, to me, this movie, more than anything else, is a love story, and a very, very, very good one as far as I'm concerned. And such great casting, because Talia Shire and Sylvester Stallone, they have such chemistry. They look physically like they belong together, and their attitudes play off each other extremely well. I don't think Talia Shire even gets enough credit for just what a good actress she is in these films, or even in the Godfather movies. She's just absolutely wonderful.
Oh yeah, I've always kind of ranked her performance even above Stallone's. I think she's the heart and soul of the series.
She's in my favorite scene.
Well, and she's the heart and soul of Rocky himself, because, again, not to get too far afield, but like Rocky Balboa, Rocky 6 is him having to learn to live without her, because in many ways the best part of him died at that point. But here you see that relationship really start to bloom.
Guess
but
what, Dan? I haven't seen it yet.
She has such soulfulness, though.
Someone else who reminds me of Rocky is Andrew Dice Clay.
What?
I would wholeheartedly disagree with that. I mean,
me too.
Maybe in terms of his external look, but attitude, no.
I mean, totally. I wore a leather jacket too. Did I look like Rocky?
No, his attitude couldn't be more different from Andrew Dice Clay, I'm afraid.
Right?
Though, I can see some
just the way that he talks is kind of how he.
Because he's from
I think
Philadelphia.
Dice is more of a New York accent, though, isn't he?
Philadelphia, close to New Jersey, close to Massachusetts. I have the fucking accent if I want it.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Dice Clay is all bravado, all this, all that. I mean, Rocky he's a guy from the streets, but I mean, he's just a fundamentally good guy.
He made fun of himself more than he was.
Oh, for sure, and he'd never dream of, like, so one of my favorite character traits of Rocky, well, he always just seems to instinctively do the right thing, for the most part. I mean, you don't really get a sense of, like, the usual, like, instincts towards trickery or anything, but like the biggest thing about Rocky that keeps me coming back to the character, and actually my mom, who could not give less of a shit about boxing, doesn't like physical violence at all, but she loves the movies and loves Rocky himself, because even when he lashes out, and he is an emotional person, but like, even when he lashes out, he always feels so bad about it and makes up with the person right away. Like, he really is a soft-hearted guy.
Yeah.
And like, even when he's morally in the right, like with Mickey, which we're getting ahead of ourselves, but like, even then, he feels bad about it, and he's a real softie, and I think that's part of what is great about his name is Rocky. He has the iron chin. He can take a lot of abuse, but inside he really is quite tenderhearted.
It seemed like he always tried to be helpful.
Yes.
He tried to help
Yep.
everybody around him. Even when he was supposed to be shaking these people down for money, he couldn't hurt them.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You know,
if I break the guy's thumb, he gets laid off, and well,
You
let
know,
me do
it's-
the
You leave
figure
the
it out, right,
thinking to
Doc?
me.
Just here on in, just let me do the figure it. These guys, they think we run some kind of charity or something. We got to talk about Gazzo at some point. But yeah, you're right. He actually he and Gazzo do play off each other really well because Gazzo
Yeah.
is
And Gazzo isn't even the worst guy either. I mean, yeah, he's a
well,
loan
that
shark, but he was really good to Rocky. I mean, he gave him money for and just didn't ask for anything back. You know, he's
Well,
just really good to him.
well, and that's something that all the movies really, but the first one in particular, the quote unquote antagonist is Apollo Creed, but he's really not a villain at all. And
Oh no,
the conflict is just how hard life is. That really
Yeah,
is
that-
the
that's the
conflict.
real
Like,
villain.
yeah,
I look
but
at
Villain.
I look at Creed as kind of a combination of Muhammad Ali and George Foreman,
yeah,
because a
that's
lot
what
of
he
their
was based on.
bravado is a mixture of the two. And even if you look at his fighting style, which we'll get towards that at the end, it's kind of funny. I did not care much for boxing, but I learned a heck of a lot about it because my father made sure that I learned a heck of a lot about it.
Mhm.
But I noticed that even his fighting style was actually more of a mix of the two, which is kind of a weird thing because you don't consider them a huge mix, because Muhammad Ali was a lot more of a boxer, very fast mover, and Foreman was not necessarily known for his speed, but more his strength. But
Yeah.
they played both of those up a little bit, more the speed than the strength. But definitely you could see that he was relying more on heavy hits than.
Yeah,
Then,
well, like,
You would think.
you see Rocky's own fighting style changes over the course of the series, but like in this first one, you see
Especially in the second
Apollo
Yeah.
Creed's very much about the speed, the rhythm, the moving. Rocky's footwork sucks in the first two movies, but he is a heavy hitter and he can take a lot of
Mhm.
abuse. But yeah,
And he's a southpaw, which it's dangerous.
Well,
yeah.
first two
Most
movies
people
have
aren't
the
southpaws,
best.
so.
The first two movies have the best fight choreography, in my opinion, out of the series. I need to
Second
rewatch some
one.
of the later ones, but the
Definitely
first
the
and second
second one over
really
the first one, I'd say. But
I did want
it's
to
surprising.
mention one actor real quick.
Go ahead.
Thayer David. He played in Dark Shadows in the very beginning of the series, and I recognized him.
Nice.
It's
like,
surprising that I wasn't a boxing fan because I'm actually from the same hometown as Rocky Marciano.
oh, cool. That's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
I knew his nephews.
Well, we're talking about characterization here. I mean, there really are no like classical two-dimensional like mustache twirling bad guys. Even the quote unquote antagonists really aren't villains. Really, they're just opponents. But like,
Yeah, he was very
like,
likable.
well, a good example. Well, so we already talked about Adrian a little bit, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But like, we might as well. We've been teasing it. We might as well talk about Gazzo a little bit because like. Rocky's day job ostensibly is a collector for Gazzo's a local loan shark, and he definitely had. I mean, it's Joe Spinell is a great character actor of the 70s and 80s, and he has that really sleazy feel to him, and yet he's really not that bad of a guy, to be honest.
Right.
I mean,
No,
he
yeah,
always
he's-
treats Rocky really well. I mean, he treats him
does.
fairly, and he's far more generous to him than he has any right to be, and I always like that about the character. I'd never like seeing a lot of those like really two-dimensional like just sleazoids who have no redeemable qualities in them whatsoever. And
Yeah.
I mean, granted, there's probably a lot of real life examples of that, but I just like the fact that he's in this position, but he's really not that bad of a guy. And it's kind of nice when you look at Joe Spinell and like Maniac, just what a far cry Gazzo is from him, but it's, in much the same way that Rocky's exterior doesn't really match the interior. Gazzo totally looks like he would be like an amateur pornographer or something, but he he always treats Rocky fairly, and if anything, he helps him out in ways that you wouldn't expect, and
Yep.
and
Ironically, it was Rocky himself who was an amateur pornographer before this movie.
oh,
Yeah.
that's right, because of the party at Kitty and Studs, yeah.
Yeah, he was the
That's-
Italian stallion before he climbed in the ring.
That's right, because that's when Stallone was really, really desperate.
It helps too that Gazzo is just a loan shark. You know,
Yeah,
he
exactly.
gives
Yeah.
loans. I mean, you know, when he has to come and break your thumbs or whatever, it's because you defaulted on paying for a long time. You know,
Exactly.
he's given loans to people in this impoverished part of the neighborhood that probably couldn't get them from a bank, and
Yeah,
he's doing it out
exactly.
of pocket. So if you fuck him over, maybe you deserve to get roughed up a little bit.
Yeah, and you could do a lot worse than Gazzo is, and that's part of what I think is interesting about him. But yeah, he furthers the central theme of the exterior and the interior not matching, and also just for a relatively small character, man, is he memorable. And there are just a lot of that's the thing, like the world around Rocky, like all the characters that he's surrounded by, they're so memorable. Even the lesser developed ones, you
Oh.
can't forget them.
I love the
Little
bodyguard.
Marie calling him a creepo is a memorable.
Oh
character,
yeah,
you
and when
know?
she again, not to spoil, but she does come back in 6. But yeah, that whole scene is incredible. They were actually going to cut that scene with him and Little Marie, but I think it's so critical because
Yeah.
Rocky's going out of his way to pay it forward to someone who really needs it. I mean, he was probably a delinquent in his own way. He's trying to pay it forward with what wisdom he's accumulated, and she totally just disregards it. And again, talk about subtext. Yeah, who are you to give advice, creepo? Who are you? And that's
You're a creepo.
yeah, it's very like small, but man, there's just so much weight to that line. But yeah, again, in all these little incidents, he's just continually beating his head against the wall with, he doesn't want to be this tough guy that he's supposed to be with Gazzo. He can't make headway with Adrian, who, is too afraid to really give him the time of day. And she's kind of been stuck in her life for a long time and, tries to pay it forward with the next generation and can't get there either. And, tries to take out his frustrations to Polly, who now talk about a character who could have been utterly despicable. You could have like
Yeah.
absolutely roasted this guy over the fire with hatred, but this is an example of what great acting can do because
Yeah.
Burt Young, again, criminally underrated actor. I mean, he gives that role something beyond what's on the page, I think. Not to
Oh,
say
totally.
not to say that what's on the page is bad or but at all, but like that's one of those roles that in anybody else's hands you would have wanted to crucify this guy. And
He's
yes, he
kind
was
of an
good.
ass, but you
I was
still
gonna
like
say,
him.
I still,
He's a
he's
likable
still
ass.
very unlikable.
Oh, he's probably the most flawed character out of the entire
Yeah,
cast in the whole
technically he's the
series.
worst person.
But
in the
again,
series,
same thing.
But he means
he goes
well.
out of his way to help Rocky, and
Yeah.
and he's a good friend to him, even though he's
Well,
he's definitely an
Well,
ass. But
Well, he speaks to again. I think Burt Young really. There's something that he brings to it beyond what's on the page that makes you. Again, he does terrible things, says terrible things, but you understand him, and you know that he's just a messed up guy, and it's kind of like what Marlon Brando could bring to a lot of his roles, in the early days, as far as like, you don't excuse his behavior, but you know that he's just kind of a fuck up, and he speaks to people that we all kind of know, as far as like that family member that we can't shake off, but we know that their bark is worse than their bite, and they're really kind of their own worst enemy. And he does come through for Rocky in his own ways, as much as he can. I
Yep.
mean, his ability to do that is very limited, but it would have been so easy for that character to go so wrong, but man, does it go right. And that really does come down to Burt Young. I think he gives it a soul. He gives that character a soul and something beyond what's on the written page, I think.
Yeah, I always look
Yeah,
at
he's still a jerk.
Yeah, he is, but I always look at Polly as being like he sort of embodies the depressing hopelessness of where they live at first, and the frustration of all of it, not being able to do anything about it, and kind of constantly being held down. And then in later films, he kind of, keeps everybody rooted to where they came from, I think.
That's true.
Because
I
they
mean,
get richer, and they all move on to these more glamorous lives, but Paulie doesn't change dramatically throughout the series. He's still Paulie, and I think that's
well,
key to the whole
if
thing.
anything, he's probably the biggest overt product of his environment, for both better and for worse. Because, like you said, like especially like in 3, he keeps it real in a way that not even Rocky does. Because by that point he's very civilized, and got money and everything. He's just kind of this ne'er do well clinger on, but but at the same time he does keep it real in a way that makes him stand out. Now, in this case, because they are in that old neighborhood, in that rundown place, it's a little too real, in that he shows that this is what can happen when you do give in to the disappointments that life brings. Because,
Yeah.
well, I think part of what Burt Young brings to it is, it's like, I remember, we're getting way out of order here, but like one of a pivotal scene for him is when he has the baseball bat and he's freaking out and having a rage fit. What does he do specifically? He attacks the picture frame on the mantle. So what I took that to mean was that he and Adrian both, they look like people whose parents probably died young and they kind of had to fend for themselves. And he looks like someone who probably had to carry the load for both of them as much as he could. And that kind of wore him down. And if anything, it kind of worked against both of them, because he does inadvertently hold his sister back from living her best life, and
While trying to push her forward, maybe a little too hard, though.
And in the wrong ways, yeah.
Boy, I'll tell you, he has one of the funniest scenes in the entire franchise, though, when he rips that fucking turkey leg off and then just chucks the bird out the back door.
We've already talked about that. You missed it.
Well, we're gonna get to it more in depth, but but I think that really is what makes the character, is that they do feel like brother and sister, but also like you get the sense that he really did look out for her in the early stages of their relationship, but eventually the tables turned to where he wasn't going anywhere. She kind of had to take care of him, and that wasn't helping her. And, those dynamics are so clear, and that's part of the acting and the writing make all that history.
Oh yeah, they did a great job showing that, these two were definitely family, and they both had codependencies on each other.
For sure. And in a lot of ways, especially in their early history, it was kind of necessary, but then it overstays its welcome,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, growing up, they definitely needed each other, but once they were adults, they could probably live their own lives, but they were so used to each other that that they convinced themselves that they need to be there for the other,
Oh, for sure, yeah. And then, I mean, since we're doing it character by character, we got to talk about Mickey, who's another.
I was going to mention him.
Yeah, well, he's another.
I love Burgess Meredith.
Oh yeah.
I still, when I was a kid watching him, I still expected him to go wah 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 wah.
Oh yeah. Well, I first knew him as Mickey, actually, but
I first knew him as Penguin, so
it's always one of those two, pretty much.
I might have seen the Twilight Zone episode before, where he's like stuck with no books or whatever.
I don't think I've seen that one.
I would guess probably. My introduction might have actually been his final film roles. Is the cantankerous grandpa and grumpy old man.
Yeah, fucking best role ever, dude.
What? No love for.
He has so many great one-liners in those movies.
No love.
He's a great actor.
No love for the Ripper video game, the FMV game.
Don't know that one.
He was in that pretty late in his career. But yeah, Mickey is another tough as nails character who's very rough around the edges, has the almost, like, you could argue, and this is more in retrospect, but like nowadays you do that gravelly voice and people immediately think of Mickey, and it's almost cartoon like, but it feels real with him, and that's because Burgess Meredith was such a classical actor. I mean, in that archetypical model of the the youth warrior and the older mentor figure. I mean, he checks off those boxes, but it feels a lot more down to earth, and he's another character whose potential wasn't fully realized, and because I didn't have no management, and he's someone who, again, life has beaten him down. He's very bitter, and he takes it out on Rocky when he shouldn't, and he doesn't give him the time of day. But again, he has good arguments for it. Like you
I
said, he had the
understand this
talent
point.
he had the talent to become a good fighter, and he squandered it. So why would you put up with someone like that over time? Because Dipper needed it. Dipper's a contender, for when he put his stuff on Skid Row, from the locker. And but he's someone who, even when he offers to manage Rocky, to train him, and Rocky, he even has a good point of calling him out on
where you
not giving him
been
a
all this
chance.
time?
Yeah, he calls him out on it, but even then, you don't hate Mickey because he's got dimension. He had good points to make, and then Rocky had good points to make, and they reconcile, and then they have such a great dynamic.
Still be charming as Mick is. He knows he's in the wrong, so he just takes it on the chin. He doesn't really argue it,
Yeah.
He doesn't begrudge or deny Rocky his anger at him because of the way he treated him. He just kind of sadly walks out while Rocco's screaming at him in the background. It's always one of my favorite scenes of the series because it's like,
for sure, very real.
He wanted, once he saw he had the opportunity, he wanted to help, but he wasn't going to try to force his way in because he knew that he'd kind of did Rocky dirty.
Oh, for sure. And the perception of just being a latcher on to success, is definitely there. I mean, everybody kind of comes out of the woodwork when he does get a shot, but that's kind of our major cast. I mean, we're gonna get to Apollo Creed, and let's talk about Apollo Creed. Actually, let's screw it. Let's do all the characters. Yeah. But, okay,
He's
so
smart,
again,
educated, obviously a great boxer.
yeah. Well, I have to.
Hell of a mustache.
Well, I have to say quite a lot about Apollo Creed because,
yeah, like I said,
Carl Weathers is such a criminally underrated actor. I think.
love Carl Weathers.
I love him to death,
I'm
and
so glad he's in The Mandalorian.
He is great in this one.
Well, and Apollo Creed as a character, I always looked up to the guy when I was a kid, and it's not hard to understand why, because again, he's so different from Rocky, and even as the series goes on, he's so distinctly different from Rocky. But so this is a guy who's got the gift of gab. He's articulate. He's oozing with charisma. Obviously, the ranked, heavyweight contender, undefeated. He's got so much going for him. And his great character flaw is pride, which again, it's not to excess, and it's not.
You don't see that as much in the first movie.
No, not as much, but it's still there even then.
Yeah.
But you see him, he's kind of he knows he's the best, but he's also not boastful about it, but he does have pride, and he does exercise it, and but he's someone who you can understand why anybody would look up to him. Yeah, confident, yes, confident, charming, obviously has the ability, but he also again, he's not a bad guy whatsoever. In fact, he's a very
he's likable.
Yeah, very likable, very kind of honorable person. I mean, not without his flaws, but he's someone that you can understand why anybody, and especially African American youth of the time, would have looked up to. And I bring that up because Carl Weathers, I watched some of the behind the scenes in preparation for this, and Carl Weathers, who had been an athlete prior to acting, he really made a point to imbue this character, because he related to the character a lot, and he made a point to imbue him with a sense of honor and purpose and dignity and everything, and charm and all the others, because he felt like it was important for him as a man, and specifically as a black man, to do that at that time. And in fact, he said that everybody since then has really adored that character and seen him as an icon, and he really is. You know, he acts like one. All the best qualities that you would want of an icon, because he is not just physically strong, but he's also charming and smart. You know, because like what he said was, you know, without a ring contender, what this fight is going to need is a novelty. You know, and so when what he does is simultaneously very, it is very generous, but it also is very calculated and very smart for advertising, for ratings, for feeding into the whole buzz around the bicentennial, because that was a huge event at the time. And that's why I love that scene with him and the fight promoter. He's like, Apollo, I like it. It's very American. No jerky.
Yeah, and
It's very smart.
it was a smart move having them make it very clear that, of course, you know, he thinks he has it in the bag, and it's just going to be real good publicity for him and a way to make money. But they also do make it very clear that giving this random underdog fighter, you know, some unknown fighter, an opportunity to hit the big stage is also part of their consideration in doing it. You know?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's great. It's great. It was a great dynamic. It was a great idea. I mean, he didn't have an opponent, and he comes up with this. It was a great idea. Just give some
Well, and he also,
a chance. I mean, I thought they would do, like, you know, they could have done like maybe a small tournament or something to make it more legit, but he just pulls his name. He just pulled his name out of the book because he likes the name. So that's kind of just like extreme luck.
yeah. What I like about the way that scene is played, what I really love about it is that you get the sense that, you know, he does have because I'm sure he, you know, came from humble beginnings and everything, but like you get a sense that he does believe in what he's saying, but he is also not immune from the practical advantages that it gives him in terms of advertising the fight and making for a great event and all that. But you never feel like he's being dishonest. You just get the sense that he knows all the different angles on which this will work, you know. And again,
a certain part of it's self-serving, but it's not entirely selfish.
Exactly. So there's, again, dimension in what could have been. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, actually, there are lots of examples of this sort of thing in real life, believe it or not, when it comes to boxing, where you will have a champion go for lower ranked fighters, especially if it's something like this, like somebody that was in a better rank canceled, or in some cases where a fighter wants to play it safe. You'll find them go after that, and then usually they hand them their butt essentially when they fight them. But there are exceptions. I mean, I think I sent you all actually a link to the actual fight, which was not very long, where there was one that went the other way, where you had one of the Klitschko brothers who were unstoppable to the point where their fights were almost boring to watch because they were always one-sided. And they ended up taking a lesser-known boxer named Corey Sanders. No relation to the politician.
Nor to Colonel Sanders.
But he had...
Now, him I know. Politician I don't.
But he ended up, of course, because of that, he did not do a lot of extra training. He just figured this would be an easy fight. I'll take it out. And he was warned a lot of times. But he ended up losing the fight and the championship because of it. Because he did not expect that this person, who was this older fighter, he was in his like late 30s or early 40s at the time. This older fighter, kind of washed up, that he couldn't do any damage. But this dude was an amazingly heavy hitter, and actually ended up getting the fight stopped because he ended up beating him down so much in the first fight. He came back and beat him on the second fight because he trained for it. But that's the same thing in this one. Is Apollo? I'm guessing Apollo didn't train that hard, if at all, for that fight. He was just expecting it to be a cakewalk. It wasn't until the second fight where he was taking it seriously.
Hard. Yeah.
But I thought that was very interesting that you can actually see a lot of parallels to that in real life in the boxing field. It's been like that for a long time.
Dude, Apollo is like the perfect first opponent for Rocky because pound for pound, he's clearly a better boxer skill wise in both movies.
Yeah.
But he illustrates perfectly the point of when you're on top like that, sometimes you don't want it as bad as the underdogs. You know, sometimes you can kind of slip up and not train enough or just not have that special fire. You know, even in the second fight, Apollo wants to beat Rocky to like save face. You know, it's not so much that he really needs to restore his reputation. I mean, he's got an epic legacy as a boxer already in the first film. But Rocky,
so many people thought he was
it.
throwing the fight or whatever.
Well, the again, not to get too far ahead, but Mickey says it in Rocky 3 that, you know, the worst thing happened to you, the worst thing that can happen to any fighter, he got civilized. And we see that with Apollo right here in the beginning, is that he is the best skill wise, but he also has earned a comfortable, you know, it's comfortable at the top, a little too comfortable, and you see that, and he
slid a little bit away from being a brawler and more into being a businessman, and that
exactly
the ass pretty
and
hard.
but a darn good one. I mean, he's clearly got the acumen for it. But again, he just got a little too comfortable, and he thought about, you know, the novelty of the fight, right, and not that this guy could actually beat him, you know.
Well, and you mentioned it, so we might as well briefly touch on it. But, you know, Apollo's transition from opponent to mentor to friend in the series is pretty great to behold as well.
It's wonderful, but in the seeds of it are already here in the first one. I mean, and that goes down to the writing as well as just Carl Weathers has not gotten the credit he deserves as an actor. I don't think. I think he's a real standout in this movie and in the cinema of like
I
the 70s,
love
and
the
especially the
transition
80s.
between the two so much, dude. At the end where Apollo's like, ain't gonna be no rematch, and then as soon as the second movie starts, he's like, I will fuck this crack up. You know?
Well, you can see like
ready to go.
It's a great difference if you think about it between the man himself and the bravado. And unfortunately, and you notice when he's talking about the rematch, when he's saying there's not going to be any rematch, he's saying that like as they are, they only Rocky can really hear
the
it.
Decision is read, you know, and it's mostly that always used to make me laugh when I was a kid, but then I think about it now, and it's like, well, that's before the decision is read, and it was more about in that moment. It's like almost like a, you know, a consummation
it's over,
in a weird, well, and also just the idea that they wore each other out so badly, and they don't think they could go any further. But then,
and
well,
once
but then
he gets
also
camera
like
shoved in his face after the fact, it's probably a lot more embarrassing. So you know, most of us might be like, shit, if we go again, I'll fuck him up. You know, like because
not only that, but that's
out after they shove cameras in your face. You know.
Yeah.
Not only that, but it's before the decision. It's also before the decision. Well, it's also before the decision is read, but then afterwards, it's a split decision, and you know, he got the sense that he won, but he didn't beat him. You know, and there's a difference between the two. He had no clue that Rocky was going to beat him as badly as he did, but. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but I mean,
well, that's because Rocky took it seriously.
Exactly.
You know,
when they fought, they had the I see.
I love the scene where he first gets asked to do it, and he's just like, "Nah." He's like, "That won't be any kind of fight," you know, because he knew that Apollo Creed was best in the world, and he knew he wasn't anywhere close to that caliber at that particular time.
It was the 70s equivalent to being asked to go have Mike Tyson cave in your face. You know,
he really decided to go for it.
Yeah.
Well, Apollo never took the first fight totally seriously until he, you know, until they were so far into it that he realized that Rocky, you know, even the people in Apollo's corner is telling him he's taking this for real. You know,
exactly.
To tell him he's doing this for real. Well, you know.
It's worth pointing out
his
that
manager's name, but he points it out right out of the gate when Apollo picks Rocky too. That like this dude's a southpaw. I don't like it, man.
Yeah.
I mean that's dangerous. You know,
you don't want to mess with a southpaw.
I mean,
like
he was looking at like a fight on the TV with them and saying, "It's like you should be checking this out. You should be like."
Yeah.
And meanwhile, because he's beating the meat, like beating his meat. And the thing, but
when he's on the news, and Apollo is just like yeah, I mean business too, and like he's not even listening.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's just like this guy looks
That's
like
one of the
he
best
means
scenes in the
business.
series, man. His manager like leans forward, I think, as it's playing, and he's like, "Holy shit! Like this is not just a publicity stunt for this kid. He's coming in there ready to bust this dude's ribs."
Yeah,
Well,
which he
Duke
does.
is a criminally underrated
He
character
does.
in the
That's
series.
there you go. His name was right
Yeah.
on the tip of my brain. I just couldn't bring it up.
Yeah, he's a
And
criminally
like, you
underrated
know, you
character.
can't blame him for being cocky. As we established, Apollo has the skill. His mustache alone could best most fighters, I'm sure. So
For sure.
yeah, he's going in there with some well-deserved confidence, but you know, Rocky's got that fire. He's got the eye of the tiger like 2 movies before the song was even written, you know.
Yeah.
And they established
But
that pretty quick when the actual fight starts too. Like the announcers, like Apollo falls down pretty much right away after a couple of punches.
yeah,
And the announcers really make sure to emphasize, you know, he's never been knocked down before.
yeah.
I think he's even kind of
Well,
trying
and
to play around with Rocky at first, and
Oh,
Rocky's
he is.
coming out
He's
there
totally
swinging. He's loaded
he's
for
totally
bear, you know?
dancing and fooling around like it was just some publicity thing.
Yeah.
Their fight wasn't real for him at all. You know, and look the way he
Well,
came
that's-
into the ring. I love the way
it-
he came into the ring in the first one. He comes in on this float and everything, all dressed up and everything. All
Doesn't he have a top hat on?
And then the second
Yeah.
movie, he comes in walking
It
in,
looks like a
punching
big
like
flag.
he's in for a
Yeah,
fight.
it's-
You know.
he's all business in the second one, but
Yep.
it's fair to point out that, you know, the whole knocking him down thing. I mean, the whole story of Rocky was inspired by the Chuck Wepner fight with Muhammad
I was gonna
Ali.
say that Chuck Webner and Rocky Marciano is the characters based on
Yeah.
both combination of
Yeah.
the two.
Well,
When I was a
and
kid, I thought it was
specifically that-
Rocky Marciano, but
Well, specifically that Chuck Wepner did knock down Muhammad Ali, and
yep.
that, you know, for as much as we celebrate,
And they did go to 15 rounds as well. So
yeah. Well, and as much as we celebrate Muhammad Ali's life and career, it's the fact that Chuck Wepner will always be remembered for that, you know, and that was part of what inspired the idea that, you know, his whole life crystallized in that moment, and so does with
And
Rocky being able to go the full
glorious.
15 rounds. Yeah.
Fucking glorious. I mean, Rocky could have never fought Apollo again after the first fight and
No.
still been famous as a boxer, probably for most of his life, you know.
Exactly.
Obviously, he chose not to do that. We got like 5 other films out of it. But,
Yeah.
And in all fairness, Apollo did win that fight.
He did.
Mean,
but they both beat each other very badly, though.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's fair to
he
say.
won,
like,
but he didn't beat him.
Yeah, it's not about, and that's the thing is that, and that's one of the differences I found as a kid and as an adult. As an adult, I could understand this as a fight sense. Apollo was easily out punching Rocky like 2-1, easy,
Totally.
more than that, and that was like he was racking up the points like nobody's business, and you could see that, and that's one thing, and I do want to go more in depth on it when we get into the fight because there are a lot of nuances there that I don't see in any of the other movies, which are really cool.
Yeah, they just kind of slug it out in the other ones. In this one, it's an actual boxing match. Like,
yes.
You know, Apollo wins because of points, which in a real fight, that's what would have happened.
Well,
like Brian said, he was tagging his ass. So.
Rocky does no favors by leading with his face.
Oh no. Yeah, that always used to like baffle me when I was a kid. Like, guard your face, man. You know, but I mean, I guess that's part of his technique. Is that
Rocky Marciano's technique, which
he wears his opponents out with just how much abuse he can take, and then he comes right back.
Mickey mentions that when he sees the poster of Rocky Marciano, says you kind of remind me of him.
There's an actual strategy that he uses to take down Apollo as much as he did, and like I said, I'll go into that a little bit later. But it is actually a pretty well thought out strategy. And I don't think a lot of people look at it and think about it that way.
Well, the thing we do need to illustrate, and obviously, you know, you guys will get in the 500 points a bit later, but the whole southpaw thing is repeatedly mentioned because it is a big deal. They're opposite stances, basically. And while that is dangerous for Apollo, it also makes Rocky, I think a lot of southpaws are prone to leading with their face because it's the same thing for them. Their jab hands and their hook hands are opposite for the southpaw too. So he has a hard time anticipating or blocking the shots. So Rocky just has the genius strategy of just saying "fuck it."
Yeah.
All right to the
You know,
door.
it's kind of funny. So I've been watching a lot of movie reaction videos lately, and Rocky and Rocky 2 are pretty common ones. So if you take all the clips that the people in these videos use together, I've seen Rocky 1 and 2 probably about 5 or so times in the past couple of weeks. And the one thing everybody always says, it's like, guard your face. What are you doing? Like they get really worked up about it. And so it's a valid
It's not
point.
hard to understand why, because that's how I
His fucking
felt
skull
about
is
it.
that Italian-made Philly steel, man. Like he just doesn't need to. Apparently,
I was like, just take those hits, yeah.
Jesus
Rocky would have
Christ.
won.
Marciano style.
Rocky would have won if he had a Philly cheesesteak right before the fight.
Oh, of
Maybe.
Hell yeah. He
It's like
pukes all
spinach.
over Adrian at the end.
That's like spinach to people in Philadelphia.
Rocky's brain very compact, easily insulated against hits.
Yeah,
Yes, it
something like
is.
that.
Well, he studied
they-
those turtles at depth and just mentally thickened his skull.
Indeed,
By,
yes.
Another thing I love about it is I remember him talking about his nose. He never had his nose broken.
That's
and
right.
And then Creed broke his nose. And
Like,
again, in the
immediately,
second movie,
too,
broke
right?
his nose again. So
Well, yeah,
never had it broken.
well, it's interesting to note that so Apollo Creed had not been knocked down before. Rocky had not had his nose broken before. Both
Yep.
of those are firsts for them. And then
Yep.
towards the end of the fight, Apollo's ribs are broken, which that was always Apollo's big weakness, was the body shots. But his ribs are broken,
Oh,
which were
Rocky fucked his body up.
which was foreshadowed with the meat, as we saw. But
Yep.
his ribs are broken, and then Rocky gets his eye busted up pretty badly, which factors
second
into the second one, but yeah,
do
so
a
they
good job of
dish it
making it
out
clear
pretty
for both
evenly with each
fighters.
other.
Yeah, exactly. They do a good job with both fighters of illustrating that Rocky's not just fighting some gym rat that he can, power his way through the fight and, just eventually knock him out. And, Apollo's not facing just some bum off the street. This dude's clearly ready to box, so it's, I love that element of it.
For sure.
Both
Like
of them, have their career firsts right away in the fight. I think isn't even before Rocky comes back to his corner the first time that he breaks his nose, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty early on.
Yeah, it's right away.
I think it's
mean,
Apollo's
first or second
punch that
round.
lands that breaks his nose, isn't it?
Did we
I
get
think
to
you
your
might
first
be right,
impression,
Dustin.
Dustin?
Not yet. I'm trying to get there.
Oh, shit.
No, getting kind of drowned out. I had to join pretty late, so my day was ridiculous. I first saw this. I don't even remember when. Like, I don't think I was older than 10, and there was just like a marathon on USA or something. And they're just solid movies. Like I wasn't like blown away by them or anything. It was just like, oh, these are good. So I didn't have like a big response to it or really a story all that much worth telling. But I've been familiar with this series for a while, and Rocky's one of those interesting franchises where most of the entries are really good. Like Rocky 1 through 4, pretty great. Like each one, pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
Rocky 5, oh boy, we just forget about that one.
Yeah, we're gonna
Full
have
disagree.
to.
I love Rocky 5.
Well, we're gonna
I
have
like
to
Rocky 5.
dive into it in depth eventually. But yeah, I was trying to get to your first impressions, but everybody. Well, I'm glad everybody's got a lot to say about this movie. I mean, it's hard not
He
to.
just
It's
kind of hopped
very
in seamlessly
iconic.
into the discussion when he joined. So go ahead and fire it out there, Dustin. Continue.
Yeah.
Well, that was my first impression. I mean, it's pretty great.
Oh, there we go.
Well, but,
Yeah, unfortunately, I was kind of in the same boat, dude, because I don't remember when I saw Rocky for the first time.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I just know
I
as
was
a
so
kid.
young.
well, it's kind of funny that everybody says that, because I remember pretty exactly, but I think it's also because I saw it like right as I first
And
moved.
you said you loved it right away too.
Loved it right away, but
young.
also just the
I didn't.
timing of it was really critical because it was like just after I moved, cross country, and so that's part of what sears it into my memory, is that it was, I guess, in a weird way, sort of a grounding, force in my life at that time. And it was actually one of the first DVD sets I think I ever bought, because DVD players were still relatively new at the time. But yeah, I was into it full time. But
See,
yeah,
we first got it on that ugly, god awful red box set of VHS tapes that they had back in the day, where every cover is just a photo of Rocky standing there.
Yes.
I've still got like half the tapes, I think, somewhere.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
yeah,
I
I
don't
remember
know if
that.
that's the word too.
I remember
that
DVD set where
That's
they
the
made up
times.
a single image when you put them all together.
The Blu-ray set's
that's
pretty
the one I
nice too. It
remember.
comes with all these like little fight cards or whatever. I thought it was pretty neat.
I'm waiting for the 4K set to come out. There's gonna be one.
Yeah, I'm gonna get them first thing. I'm looking forward to that. Let's think. We covered off characters. We covered off characters pretty thoroughly. I mean, and we got a little bit of the fight. I mean, I think the glue that really holds this, and we bring up character because, well, it is really a character film. I mean, the plot is
Totally
very
inspirational character.
yeah, its plot is very simple, but I mean, the characters really make it shine, and this really is an actor and story centric film. But I think the real glue that holds it together really is Rocky and Adrian's relationship. I mean, we look at the poster right in front of us, and it's them together, and it's what?
You don't think it was the epic tale of Cuff and Link?
I believe that you're correct, and Apollo's mustache, but
Apollo's mustache, Cuff and Link, and the robot, put them all together.
We
those
also
are
have
the
to
real
mention.
unsung heroes.
We also have
of
to
this
mention
franchise.
his other pets. He's got the goldfish Moby Dick,
and
then Butkus the dog. Which fun bit about that, when he was shopping the screenplay, he sold Butkus was his dog.
Yeah.
And he sold him for $50 just because he had no money.
Yeah.
And then after they picked up the script, he bought him back.
Well, he bought him back, and guess what? Butkus apparently was really flatulent as a dog, and got back to the hotel room, and he took a giant shit, and he was like, "This dog has to be in the movie because he's got star power."
Yeah.
Fucking A, dude, that's amazing.
Yeah,
it is.
I mean, but you're right. The plot is pretty. I mean, there's not much to the plot. Rocky's a thumb breaker for a loan shark. That's an aspiring boxer, but he's not getting anywhere. Apollo is like, didn't someone drop out of a fight with him? So he's like,
he got hurt or something.
So he decides to
Mackley Green broke his hand, and that's why they had to do it.
That's right.
Well, and the novelty factor comes in because Apollo wants to feel some heat from that name, and he says, "This is what I'm looking for: the Italian stallion." Rocky Balboa, never heard of him. Look, it's the name, man. And my probably in my top 5 favorite lines in the entire franchise, Apollo Creed meets the Italian stallion. Sounds like a damn monster movie.
And keep in mind, this was but also there was that there was the nationality, there was a racial componment to it as well.
Yes, there was.
Oh, I loved how he said that in the interview.
Yeah,
when he's like, is it coincidence that you're fighting a white man on the most celebrated day, or is it coincidence he's fighting a black man?
Well, and also the Italian. It means if he can't fight, I bet he can cook.
Yeah, I love that line too. That was.
It's funny, but it is fair to point out that up until only relatively recently, Italian Americans and Irish Americans were not held in very high esteem.
Right.
Yeah, they were considered a minority group in a lot of ways, and
especially in cities like that, still,
for sure. And so
Italians were barely regarded as white people yet back in the 70s.
Well, that, and also, I looked up a little bit of every character's history and everything. Rocky is the son of first generation Italian immigrants, and
Right.
so that is part of what contributes to his low income status, and would not have set him up for success in any kind of monetary sense.
Right.
And
I mean, the way they were treated a lot back in, especially the old days, prior to the 70s, is why the mafia exists. I mean,
exactly.
they
Well,
kind of have
yeah,
to set stuff like that up.
Well,
and this kind of fits
this
into the same.
movie is as integral to the Italian American experience on film as the Godfather movies are, just
Right.
in a totally different sense, though, because this is somebody who lives a relatively clean cut life and is able to get a shot out of nowhere.
You have
And
a
it's
little
also
bit of
interesting.
it.
Go
It's
ahead.
also interesting that Adrian Taliashire and Agazo Dos Pinel are in both the first two Rockies and the first two Godfathers, and
Yep.
apparently they don't share a single scene between the four movies.
Yeah, they don't. And
But
Talia Shire is pretty shafted in the Godfather movie, which
right.
is the heart and soul of these movies.
It's interesting to
I will
point out,
say,
too, that you brought up the monster movie comparison, and
right.
he was later in a monster movie, as was Talia Shire. I think the only one of the main three people in the movie that hasn't done one
Predator.
is Sylvester Stallone. Yeah.
Mhm.
The
And Talia Shire was in Prophecy, the monster movie, where they're going against a giant mutant bear. It's awesome. You should check it out.
but you
Nice.
said the only one that hasn't done a monster movie. Which one?
Stallone, I think, of the three main characters of the film.
Well, he hasn't done a monster movie, but he has been a shark.
Yeah,
That's
true.
right.
He was a monster, so I guess it's
Well, and
full
his
circle.
80s roles were. I mean, let's face it. The 80s action movies were the big spectacle movies of the day, in the same way that the 40s monster movies were the big spectacles of their day. I mean, if you want to think of it in
True,
that
but
respect.
you know what I mean. I guess we
I
should say
do.
the
I do.
closest he came to properly being in a monster movie is maybe the Cannibal Clan part of Judge Dredd.
Yeah, something like that.
Those
Like,
guys are pretty
you
monstrous.
don't think of horror in Stallone, you just don't.
Unfortunately,
No,
yeah, the
But it
closest
would
he
have
really
been
came was
interesting
Cobra.
to see him in a slasher or something. Possibly.
Right, exactly. So that Cobra. Well, I love Cobra, but that's the
He
closest
could
we
play
got.
the Ahab in a movie.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, especially
that's a
nowadays
cool
that he's
whale.
older. Yeah,
They should make it a giant turtle as a nod to Cuff and Link. Though.
I love
that'd
the
be cool.
I love the Prison Break movie. What is that? The
Escape
Plan. Escape Plan 1 and 2. Those are great movies. And of course, Expendables.
Got those.
But
No.
I was always when I was younger, I was a Rambo fan.
Yeah.
Like I said, I wasn't
Hell
really
yeah.
much of a Rocky fan, but I was a Rambo fan.
We'll have to do those movies at some
My
point.
favorite Stallone was Over the Top.
Oh,
That was a good movie.
Well, and
That might be the
people
most testosterone fueled movie outside of Predator
I mean,
ever made.
it's fun. Again, it's a movie about arm wrestling, which I enjoyed,
Yeah.
but it's
just
arm
sweaty
wrestling.
dudes doing sweaty
Like
dudes.
how exciting can arm wrestling be of the whole movie? But the movie is so good.
yeah.
I think Jay Leno made fun of it, saying that it was like Rocky if it was about arm wrestling, and then I think
Right.
the other
pretty much
joke
exactly
was
what it
the other
is.
joke was that the next movie is going to be about thumb wrestling.
But it was,
I
it was a
I
very
love thumb
good
wrestling.
movie, though. As far
By the way, Mo, are you going to be ready to present your NIP stats at the end of the discussion?
Unfortunately, I did not get the nip tally done this
Oh.
week, but I will have the totals
bad.
for you guys next week. We are cataloging those nips still. So, and I'm very certain that I'm going to set up my capture card and make that nip clip for the finale episode of the
Good.
month. So we'll be able to
So-
load that bad boy into StreamYard and present those sweet milk duds to you guys out there in TV land.
So the getting back to Rocky, because
Well,
we got
and-
another
and-
film to cover after this. But wouldn't I know that Jake, you were talking about that relationship issue with Adrian, because that's
Yeah.
about where we're at.
Oh,
and-
okay.
Yeah, that's where I was, because I feel like that really is kind of the glue that holds this movie together and makes it really a great date movie on top of a great, sports film, a
Well,
great drama film.
that
But
scene
Yeah,
with her in the
yes and
apartment
no.
hasn't aged well. That's about the only part
Yeah,
of the movie I feel like now reads a little creepy.
that
Uh,
that definitely a little creepy. And the scenes before that, he's just so unrelentingly pushy with her. Again, I feel like that just hasn't aged well because that would not fly nowadays.
I think
Um,
Polly
but
was pushy. I
yeah,
don't think.
Polly was
yeah,
pushing it.
Rocky
And,
basically traps her in his apartment
yeah,
after taking off his
Yeah,
shirt.
he
and
that
does.
her
apartment
mask
thing is a
that's
bit
bungee
much.
corded to a pillar
Yeah.
with a knife stuck in it. It's very creepy when you look
Now,
at it through today's
you're right.
lens.
Actually, in a lot of those reactions, people still respond to that fairly positively.
yeah, that's
They
kind of
kind
where
of read. People tend to read the moment, and that like she does want to do this. She's just really nervous.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, I'm a little surprised to hear people say that because I mean, it
Well,
was very well regarded as exceptionally well played between the two characters, and that
Mhm.
It
they
gets
had,
good when he takes her glasses off and they
He
kiss.
does
That's
get,
very
yeah,
yeah,
creepy. Yeah, but when
yeah.
Yeah,
It's mostly
initial
the male
when he
reactors
stops
too,
her
and
from leaving,
they all
it was
feel
just
pretty comfortable with that. Surprisingly,
yeah. I mean, I
I
feel
would
like
hope
it's
that that's
exceptionally
largely in
well
part due
played.
to
She
them
was
looking at
really
it as a movie.
uncomfortable about
So,
coming into the apartment, and when she finally did, she only stood like
Yeah,
inside, and him backing her in the corner. That I can see it nowadays being a little creepy,
yeah, it
but
doesn't bother
I was
me,
but
but I
thinking
can see it reading
but
as
at the
creepy
time
to
it
certain
came out,
people.
and if you are used to it, it's a good South Side Bronx ish like of the Philadelphia Bronx,
no,
Listen,
um,
kids, just don't be approaching women that way.
but
yeah.
If she's
I
trying to
think
leave your
the
apartment, just let her go.
yeah, well,
Maybe
I
she'll
think
come back.
I think the difference is that there is a chemistry there already, and I mean, she obviously, she's trying to open up and kind of give in to the feelings that are there, and you know I don't know, I think it's a
She slides pretty
remarkable.
comfortably into living with Rock too, so
Yeah,
or at least
well,
staying over there a lot of the time.
it's a very emotionally naked scene for the both of them, even though
Right.
it's pretty chaste as far as seduction scenes go. It's a very, like, you can really
Well,
get the sense that they're both not hiding much at all from each other, and but it's also very clearly the first time that either of them have really been seen in the way that they want to be seen.
it was a great scene. I mean, because he's like, "You're uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable too." It's just,
Yeah.
and I
yeah.
love later when he's like saying, "There are
You
great
know,
things."
Adrian, I ain't so
She's
comfortable
shy
either.
and he's dumb.
Yeah,
And,
Even
How about we
it's
get
you
him
just
go
some
get a
wild.
big couple of
comfortable?
coconuts. I'm done with your shop.
even by today's standards, a lot you got to keep in mind, even because there's a lot of presentism that we could be using, I guess, to look at this. But to me, I think that even by today's standards, if you look at some things that are very popular with a lot of women there, like the 50 Shades of Grey movies,
Yeah.
Oh
or
yeah,
that 365 Days movie, where literally a guy kidnaps a woman and says that I'm going to hold you hostage for 365 days and make you fall in love with me, and that's viewed as very romantic.
Yeah, you
oh
could do
yeah.
I
so much worse than
cannot.
Rocky. I mean,
This
Rocky's
is
pretty.
nothing compared to those things. Those are
Yeah, and
modern
Right.
movies.
let's
Jokes
be
aside, it
real here. Yeah,
culminates.
let's
Jokes
be
Those
aside,
hold
it
real
up to
here.
modern
culminates.
standards.
Well, and
Jokes
let's
aside, it
be
culminates in possibly my favorite kiss in cinema history. So there is that
yeah.
Right.
as well.
Well, and let's be real here. I mean, because I've heard from like my mom and other women of the period, like, yeah, and that they were the first to say that, like, when he's like, Is it me? You don't like me?" And he like flexes his muscles and stuff. Like all the women of the time were like freaking out at that. I mean,
Yeah, there was for sure some bored housewives that were forced to watch this by their husbands that probably loved that scene.
Yeah, I mean, well, what I'm saying is like again, when
They would probably call up their girlfriends and sneak to the theater because they didn't want to be seen watching Rocky, but they were all having a couple of highballs and going in to watch that.
Oh yeah. Or
Well,
there's
and
probably those
I
wives
think
that were
it's
like,
sort
"You
of
want
a
to go see Rocky
fallacy.
again? We don't have anything planned for tonight. It's date
Well,
night."
I think it's kind of it's a modern fallacy. I mean, that's part of why people kind of that's why there's so much backlash against stuff like 50 Shades of Grey and that kind of stuff, because that is not normal or healthy. But then you look at something like this and it's like the fact that something like this is relatively, normal and even chaste, if indeed, which I highly doubt that it is, I haven't heard a single thing about it, but if that indeed is seen as problematic in any way, then we've got ourselves a serious problem, because you could do so much worse than this. And that's
Listen,
part
let's
of the
clarify here.
attraction
Okay.
that the two characters have, is that he's this big hulking guy who's not very smart, but he's also got a good heart, and she's his heart and soul and the
And she's
brains of the
smart.
bunch. Yeah. And I mean,
Let me clarify. The scene
Yeah.
itself as a whole is not creepy, but there are elements of it that, as
Exactly.
well,
on
if
their
it were
own,
anybody else in any other context, sure, it wouldn't play well, but again, that's part of the magic of it, is that, because in
if she
real
had
life,
gotten uncomfortable and ran out the door, maybe we'd be like, "Man, you really are a creepo, Rock."
Yeah.
But
Especially if
that's
he
not what
chases
ended.
after her and then drags her back by
Yeah,
her
exactly.
hair.
well, and that's, I mean, if
Could've gone much
anything,
worse.
that's kind of what happens with,
Me, Rocky, you,
well,
Adrian.
the same year, that's kind of what happens with Travis Bickle. He does even
Yeah.
creepier things and it doesn't work, and he goes down this bad rabbit hole of mental degradation, and then eventually homicide, and
Yep, just killing
but
dudes for Jodie Foster. He wasn't the first.
yeah,
Well,
Well,
because
maybe
of
the
her
last, I
shy
mean.
nature, he had to place himself in her space.
yeah, well,
to
and he's risking a lot too. Let's not
Yeah.
kid ourselves. He, like he said, he ain't so comfortable either, and he's not.
They're
I mean, because these,
clearly meant to be together. They slide so comfortably into the relationship that it makes it very, very, very sweet.
Yeah.
exactly. That's what
One of
I'm
my
saying.
favorite
Like,
scenes is them just sitting on the couch watching TV before fucking Polly freaks out. Like, it's
oh, I
just so
know.
comfortable.
Yeah,
Yep.
they really feel like two peas in a pod, and they really show what that kind of relationship looks like. And I think that, again, that really is kind of the glue of the movie. And once they are able to see each other for who they really are, and all flaws and all warts and all, but they also bring out the best in each other at the same time. And you see, like, she starts to look, she starts to take care of herself better, and he, has grounding, and she's able to get out from under Polly's, well, protective wing, but then also his kind of abusive wing at the same time.
Yep.
It's they do need each other, and they do bring out the best in each other. And so
What's that movie where they spoof the taking off the glasses too, where he takes off the glasses and the girl's cross-eyed and he's like, "Put them back on."
yeah, I think I know what you mean. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't. It's right in the back of my brain. But maybe it'll come by the end.
But I mean, it's to the point where, like, so he, with the fight having been over and he did go the full distance, he got what he wanted, even though he didn't win the fight. He did win. He met the goal that exceeded the goal that he wanted for himself. But
He didn't look like a bum.
But what is?
I think he says in no uncertain terms at one point that his whole doesn't he talk about how, like, his whole thing is he just wants to prove he can go the distance. He doesn't really care.
That is his goal.
Yeah.
Well, but then in that moment of moral victory, what's not there? It's Adrian, and then he's looking for her. He could barely see 2 feet in front of him, but then there she is finally. And it was a detail that Stallone pointed out, which is he says, "Where's your hat?" Like, that's the first thing that he says. Instead of it being about him, he observes this thing about her because he's so into her. And what they actually say is very trivial or very not special, which is, I love you, and that's it. But again, it feels like such a victory because
The way he's talking is so funny, though, dude. I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of the
Yeah.
most iconic lines in film history. The whole
Hey,
"Yo, Adrian, I
dude!
did it,"
yeah,
But it's just every time I laugh because he's so battered by that point. He looks like one of those little nylon potato people your mom would sew back in the day.
yeah,
And then he calls her in there, and like the whole hat thing is very sweet.
Oh
yeah.
yeah. The
Well,
fight
I
itself
think
doesn't
that
really matter. I mean,
Well,
the
I think
decisions
that-
Some would
were
do
like in the
that.
background.
that really is what makes it, is that he went the distance, he took the blows, but he ultimately got what really matters. And you get the sense that, again, what they're saying is not too terribly
He
profound or
basically
poetic,
got
but
the respect of the people.
but yeah, he got self-respect as well as the love of the people, but like he really got a meaningful connection with another person, and something that is gonna
Yeah,
last,
he did.
something that's gonna last a lot longer than because he got the secondary purse, and
Yeah, those
and-
turtles have seen some shit, dude.
Yeah. he got the secondary purse when it comes to the money from the fight. And obviously the losers of a fight probably don't have a short half-life, but he got something in his life that will last and really will carry
Well,
him
for a
through
fight
the
like
worst.
that, I feel like you get a lot of money.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, even
I
if
mean,
it's
he
just-
does. He gets
He got
37
37
grand.
grand after taxes and shit, which
Yeah.
in that day wasn't bad.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was-
1970s. That's like $50,000.
Yeah, that's
Like, that
quite a
car would
lot.
even have touched that 37 right there that he had gotten, and that was a brand new car at the time.
He does
Yeah.
have a sweet car and some good jackets in the series.
Oh no,
as
that was
well.
it was a you got it from a used lot.
Of course it was.
So
I mean,
yeah,
Rocky's Rocky. He's not going to immediately go out and drop
Yeah.
full ticket price on a Camaro or something.
but boy did he fuck that Trans Am up though.
Yeah, he did.
I was like,
Um,
oh, that's full crap.
Oh yeah,
But,
I can drive.
Which is my favorite. I drive
You sure you can drive this?
airplanes and tractors and
yeah.
Shoot, that's
Well,
how I
let's-
drive a
let's-
freaking stick.
Let's save most of that for the next movie.
Of course.
But because we still got another movie to talk about after this, I'm trying to move it along. But yeah, we got characters. We got we've pretty much. So a little thing about the fight while we're on the subject is the fight. Because this movie was made on such a small budget, they had to do some tricks with shooting through the ropes, shooting at lower angles to not show the arena all that much, because they could only get a few extras, and they had to get family and friends and the crew to fill it up and use stock footage to try to make it seem like it's a packed arena when it really
Certainly
wasn't.
not an issue in later Rocky films.
Yeah,
It
and
revolutionized
from 2
them.
onward, they're able
They
to
did a great
actually
job.
show off the ring.
It revolutionized how they fought, how they actually shot fight scenes, because they
Yes.
utilized techniques from the first 2 films in many other movies that use boxing.
It basically established a blueprint for how to shoot fighting in movies in a lot of ways. A lot of, when you look at even something like Bloodsport, they're aping Rocky hard in the way they shoot a lot of those fights. It's,
For sure. Well, and they also rehearsed that fight quite extensively, and they were able to shoot it in such a way that it cuts together really, really naturally. And well, it won that Oscar for best film editing for a good reason, because the
Yeah,
fight
right.
is very seamless. It doesn't feel choppy at all, and you can clearly tell where the characters are in relation to each other, and every punch, every moving around, every bit of moving around, it cuts together into each other seamlessly. And
from an athletic standpoint, those dudes basically did go the distance, because I mean, they might not have been slamming fucking punches into each other all the time. I feel like that did happen several times over the Rocky series, but from a conditioning point of view, these dudes were doing the fight probably multiple takes on certain sequences of it.
I mean,
yeah,
so they probably went like 12 rounds multiple days when you look at it from just a pure conditioning point of view.
for sure. I mean,
mean,
they
not
were
much
athletic
athleticism
guys.
there.
They had to be athletic guys on top of being able to say the lines and play the characters.
I wanted to say something about the fight scene, just as I'm going to make it quick, but I do think that the first two movies have the most realistic fight choreography of the entire series, especially the first one. And I say that
I
because
the second one.
See, I don't agree with that as much because the second one was all about, oh, look at the giant blow after giant blow after giant blow. And
I don't know. I really got into
most
it.
boxing matches, even Tyson's fights were not like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's
it
why
was-
boxing is boring, and
Well, yeah.
you know, that's why I like the second one because maybe it was a little less realistic, but
I mean, that's
it was more
subjective, but I
entertaining.
think what Brandon's getting at is what they shot in the first one is accurate to how boxing matches.
Right, I just said that. I was saying
They don't overdo it with the sound effects either.
No, and the way that I think that they did, and this is what I thought was very genius about it, is that if you can watch this and get entertained by it, because as Ron said, yes, a long drawn out 15-round fight typically can get very boring, but they did this in a way that could please people who actually understand the sport of boxing, but also for people who are just watching it to enjoy the film. I mean, you see Rocky doing things like holding, and they do that a lot in these types of things. And they also do that to get closer. You can see the strategy, whereas Apollo was, just constantly, he was making a show of it because that's his thing. He was the showman, scoring the face shots, and Rocky's face was leading not only because that's a southpaw nature, but because he's drawing the shots to the face. Because you can take a lot more shots to the head, believe it or not, than body blows. And Rocky's strategy was literally to body blow. And you see, if you look at the fight, you see Rocky 90% of the time is going to the body. And it's been pointed out a couple times here, but and Apollo leaves his body open so much. So when you see Rocky hitting him there, eventually he breaks his ribs because he's constantly bam, bam, bam. And after 15 rounds, I mean, he was saying it. He was bleeding internally. They were talking about stopping the fight because of that.
And that's some real shit, dude. I mean, I'm no expert on boxing, but I've watched a lot of mixed martial arts, and drawing their blows to your face is a strategy some dudes that know they can take it use, because when they're focusing on your face, it's easier to get in shots on their body. And if you can just tank all those face shots over accumulative and, hold them so that you don't get gassed out. You just basically wear them out through the rounds until they are fucking bleeding internally. I mean, Apollo probably pissed blood for a week after that fight.
That was what beat Tyson when Tyson lost his fight. I mean, Tyson couldn't. If Tyson was basing all of his stuff on knocking somebody out early because he was a power puncher, and when he went in that fight, he got hit with a lot of body blows and he got stretched out and he went down because he could not take those blows. Mixed with the fact that he was not used to going the distance. And that is a really cool thing to see this before even those fights took place. It's just kind of cool to see that play out. That's
in the other movies, they get real ham with the sound effects, and they're fun to watch because they feel real dynamic, but it's like it doesn't feel like an actual test of wills like the first Rocky movie does,
If I was going for most entertaining, Rocky 4 by far most entertaining fights.
Every time those punches hit, it sounds like he's just punching through a rib cage in a fucking meat locker,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and plus, I think it's you see with Rocky's technique, like you said, he absorbs the impact to the face, and then he comes back and he just corners Apollo and other opponents in the ring and just pummels them with the body shots, just over and over again. And that's
where getting in that clinch comes in, because you can keep a lot more of your steam if you wrap the dude up for a minute and hold him. Doesn't look pretty, but in a boxing match, you have to use strategy like that.
I was like I said, I always hated all the hugging.
There's a lot of hugging in boxing.
A lot.
I mean, I get it, but it's just
it's actually the most huggable sport.
They love each other so much.
Plus, there's no kicking or anything. It's just, I mean, kickboxing.
There's no hugging in boxing.
It's a little better in kickboxing, but that's why I like wrestling. I know, Professional wrestling, not the.
I was gonna say the real thing is just as boring.
No, real wrestling is very boring, extremely boring.
Even when you watch kickboxing, dude, half of their
Professional
kicks
wrestling
are just
is
meant to put
insane.
distance between them so they can catch their
Mhm.
breath. You know?
Oh, kickboxing can be. There's just as much holding in kickboxing.
A
as
lot,
there is.
yeah. But they're good about also tossing them across the fucking ring and kicking them in the head, so it adds a little bit more spice.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's a little better than regular boxing, but yeah.
Especially when Jean-Claude Van Damme is the kickboxer.
Well, of course.
There you go.
But that's not realistic.
I'm trying to think. So we've covered off the fight, covered off characters. I guess we can talk about moments, which could lead us into our favorite. Well, actually, before we do that, we should probably talk about the music of the Rocky films. All of them is
Classic.
absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah,
But even before
Oh,
we get
definitely.
to, like,
epic.
I mean, even before we get to Rocky 4, which has probably the best soundtrack out of all of them, but before we even get there, I mean, Bill Conti really grounds this story emotionally with most of the music is very small, intimate piano. It's not terribly bombastic or anything until it needs to be, like with Gonna Fly Now, and with music actually in the ring. Which really does get the emotion going. And it's just, I think it's some of the most incredible and consistently good film music ever. Like I
It's great.
used to listen to the music all the time, like, and I mean all the time.
That mean Rocky theme is the only theme song I've ever learned how to play on trumpet. Actually, when I was in school, I could belt that some bitch out.
Sounds fun.
I played trumpet for like 4 years. It doesn't often come up in conversation because it's lame. But if we ever start a ska band, I'm ready to go, boys.
There you go.
Well, yeah, there you go.
But I mean, I've shown these movies to people, like younger people, before, and everybody knows Eye of the Tiger, right? So when you show like a middle school aged cousin Rocky, they can be kind of startled by the fact that Eye of the Tiger wasn't like always Rocky's theme song, basically. And it's weird that it gets that nod because I think it really only is in part 3, isn't it?
It's in 3 and 4.
Okay, so it is in 4. All right.
Yeah, it's the opening theme of 4, and I mean it's kind of the other Rocky theme, but I mean the Rocky theme is gonna the other one the one is Gonna Fly Now. And
yeah, that's the one I think of when I think of Rocky. But
me
a lot
too.
of younger fans think of Eye of the Tiger. Yeah,
Well,
apparently older fans too.
Well, let's
Three was my favorite, like I said. So
everybody's talking. What'd you say, Dave?
When I think Rocky, I think Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, a lot of people do. It seems. I think.
I always just think of.
Like I said, the third is my favorite.
Well, I think why I think it is because Eye of the Tiger has more lyrics and it also gets more radio play. Gonna Fly Now does have lyrics, but they're more they're infrequent, and it's mostly an instrumental piece.
It is, and it's that like real intense riff that kind of starts off Eye of the Tiger and whatever. It is more radio friendly. It is more of a standalone piece. Like this one's incredible in the film, but it's not quite. It doesn't have quite as much oomph as a standalone. I think.
Yeah,
They're
you're not
both
going to
great
hear this
pieces
on the
of
radio
music.
nearly as often.
Yeah.
Because Eye of the Tiger got played on the radio a lot, you know.
And it of course spawned imitators. There's a great anime character song that I really enjoy that is shamelessly rips off that riff, and I'm sure there have been several other songs that have as well.
Well, I mean, Eye of the Tiger really did kind of influence a lot of 80s rock sound, but here's the thing. So Gonna Fly Now, I mean, it is unquestionably the Rocky theme, but it's so the music up to that point had been very small, very intimate, very tender and melancholic, and then once Rocky's mojo is going, that's when the music gets really kind of triumphant sounding and very high energy. And let's also keep in
We
mind
got
that,
his mojo back.
exactly, but let's also keep in mind that the whole idea of a training montage, which is so cliche and passe to us now, like that was not at all the norm in, or at least not in the classical sense that we think of it today. You know, yeah, there
Right.
were montages and stuff, but it wasn't to that
I
kind
always
of
love montages.
We need a
yeah, it
montage.
wasn't to that kind of formalized degree where you set it to a song that everyone knows. You know, it wasn't to that degree yet, and this movie really did pioneer it. And also, you know, there's just little moments like that
Oh,
kind of happen spur of the moment. Like, you know, John G. Avildsen told Stallone, "Get out of the van," as we film him running past the ship, and it just the visual
right.
metaphor of that is perfect. And again, not that's like a no budget solution there, but man, does it say a lot. And just the editing, the passage of time, the way that the lyrics, you know, trying hard now, it's so hard now,
Mhm.
and then getting strong now, and then you know,
I love that.
flying high now.
Right.
It all
Out of context, those are.
Yeah.
well, but you know, it really tells you emotionally where the
Yeah.
character is at.
Yeah, I feel it.
And it's just
In
incredible. And
control.
and we're totally see, this is a problem. You could talk about this movie for like 5 hours, but we're missing possibly the scene of the entire film in the montage is, well, the most iconic location in the entire series is
The
the Rocky
stairs.
Steps. You know, because he can't get up the steps when he's first beginning training,
Right.
and then he gets up the steps you know, very with much gusto,
Uh-huh.
and he makes the iconic pose. And I mean, that again, we talk about visual symbolism. The opening fight scene was that set the tone very clearly, and as does the steps. I mean, the steps, he
Mhm.
can't get up the steps at first. He's absolutely worn out and exhausted, but then he gets up the steps as he believes in himself. And you know, that represents the entire message of the movie visually, and
It-
everyone just instinctively gets that image. And you know, they're called the Rocky Steps for a reason. Everyone understands that metaphor.
And
Statue's still there, right? I
Well,
feel like it is.
the steps
had
are
to be
there.
removed
The
for this.
statue
They
that
moved
was
it.
introduced in 3, it was up there, and then it got removed, and then it got moved again to the base of
Okay.
the steps. And I think it's at the base of the steps now. But
I feel
it's
like that's a smart move because you imagine how many people
Right.
rolled ankles trying to fucking run up that thing to that damn Rocky statue.
well,
I mean,
that,
it
and
probably
also
just
they're
became a nuisance, you know.
well, and they're also probably trying to think about, like, you know, wheelchair accessibility and stuff like that.
Right.
You know,
So-
but it's the point is they honor the heritage of
Yeah.
Rocky and what it represents and everything. 'Cause it-
Interesting side note on that one, but also you were talking about how the film kind of was part of history in a few ways.
Mhm.
One thing I saw in the trivia that was kind of fascinating was the guy that developed the Steadicam
Yeah.
actually
What was that
used
done for,
footage
Rocky?
of his.
It
What's
was
that?
the second film
sorry,
to
go
use the
ahead.
Steadicam.
It was one of the first ones to use it, but the guy that developed it filmed test footage on those very steps. I think it was his girlfriend running up and down the steps, and the director liked it so much that, you know, he was like, we got to do that basically.
Yeah.
I feel like I
But
remember reading that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
That's
the
neat.
film
So basically,
pioneered
just
so
test
much.
footage made one of the most iconic scenes in the entire franchise because the dude was like, "Those steps are rad. We gotta do something with those."
Well, and one of the most iconic films ever made, and again, not terribly expensive, and yet very, very innovative in terms of some tricks of the trade, but also just innovation with how to use what's around you, how to, you know, make use of your limitations. And I mean, they only had one turkey with the, you know, you want the bird, go in the alley and eat the bird. They only had one turkey, so they had to chase it around with blankets to catch it, you know.
No one probably saved a leg. Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
know.
great.
I love that scene. But I
Him
mean,
saving the leg makes the whole thing. Like,
it really
he takes a
does.
leg for himself and then chucks it. It still would have been impactful if he just chucked it, but him taking the leg adds a
Yeah.
little bit of humor to it.
Yeah,
But back to the
Makes-
cinematography and the music. One of the most striking scenes in the movie to me is always during the training montage, where Rocky is like running. And I think it might be the scene you're talking about in front of the ship where the music peaks right
Yeah.
as Stallone like really fucking kicks it into high gear running.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a person run physically faster on film other than like watching Olympic runners, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Which I
that
mean, and
speaks
they
to the athleticism, the or the cinematography, and the soundtrack at the same
Well,
time. I mean,
they
goddamn,
they do
Stallone was
that
a beast when he made this.
for sure. Well, and they do that again in 2 with similar speed. Different conceit, of course. He's got kids running with him, but you know, it's
True, but when he really kicks it in the ass in that sequence, it's like I'd have loved to have been there with a radar gun to see how fast he actually peaked out at running.
Oh,
'Cause
I
he
know.
was fuck, man.
Man,
He was cooking
he
it.
was fucking going
Well,
fast.
and credit again to Stallone, who has always been underrated as an actor. You know, Rocky's a very, very distinct character and identifiable, but he's also very relatable, and he's someone that, you know, we feel his struggles and his pains, but also his joys throughout the entire series. So, like, when he's succeeding, when he's getting strong now, won't be long now. Like, we feel that too. We feel exactly what he's feeling, and it's just
It builds perfectly.
it's a perfect union of performance and writing and directing, and especially music to tie it all together. You know, because
It's
if the
beautiful.
music well, and if the music weren't as emotional and perfect for each scene, each moment as it is, I don't think the movie would have worked anywhere near as well as it does.
Oh,
Like,
for sure, dude. And I mean, that specific moment where they perfectly cue the music and what's happening on the screen to work in such good, like, union to each other is phenomenal. I mean, that's a great example of like great use of music in film because they sync that whole sequence up perfectly. Like, as soon as that synth line hits where it's like zoom, is like when he kicks it in the ass and then the song
I
really
know.
fucking comes thundering in. I mean, it's perfect.
I know, I love it, and we should also like something that people don't talk about is just even some of the smaller background music of like Cool and the Gang's
Yeah,
Summertime Madness, as well as You
so
Take My
fucking
Heart
good.
Away. You Take My Heart Away with him and Adrian, like that. Those don't really get talked about very much, but man, did they add so much. They're so perfect, you know.
Even what is that word you always use? Diegetic. The music
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
actually
yeah,
happening in the scene, Rocky nails that as well. Like, it's,
totally.
you know, those dudes singing around the trash barrel is one of my favorite moments in the entire
Oh, I
movie.
know. Oh, yeah, and Take You Back. Do 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 do. I love
And the
that. You know,
acoustics, the
it's
acoustics where they're
organic
singing it at too is so great. It's like,
for
holy
sure. Well, and
shit,
it's
that's
a
like
yeah.
haunting.
Well, so Sylvester always figures out a way to give Frank Stallone his chance to shine because that was his what he was known for is singing. You know, but like that's a great way to utilize the family effectively, and you know, and it's also the singers are a good metaphor for the movie as well because they are unsung heroes, unsung talents in their own right who you know, are just like Rocky. They have this
Yeah.
potential that's probably never going to get realized,
They're kind of
unfortunately.
also those street rats that are a staple of the neighborhood that no one thinks is going anywhere. I'd like to think we
Exactly.
could make a whole series about them becoming multi-platinum recording artists.
Yeah,
or
well,
something.
that they could basically be like the Four Seasons, you know, because the Four Seasons had a similar upbringing, you know. But yeah, so we could talked about music, characters. I guess we can talk about like moments or lines of dialogue because I mean, the dialogue is just incredible, and there's a lot of wisely, like we mentioned with the turkey scene, like something like that is so nasty, but it's punctuated with humor that also is indicative of character, and there are just so many basically the entire movie is just iconic moment after iconic moment, classic line after
Yeah.
classic line. We're really splitting hairs here, but what are some that we want to throw out that we don't want to leave out?
Well, very, very briefly
Yo,
before
Adrian.
we jump into that,
Right.
I do want to shout out the special effects in the movie. They really only come into play in the aftermath of like the fight or as it's building up. But there
Yeah,
is
the
some pretty
makeup
good
is
special
great.
effects for this movie, considering the year that it came out. So yeah, you know, good nod to that. Not enough of it to really talk about. I mean, Rocky looks gross at the end of it. They did a good job.
Yeah,
But anyways,
they
go
look
ahead.
absolutely
They
brutalized.
both
both
do.
of
They
them.
both look like they went through a fucking war, and you know, they both. It was, yeah,
Yeah,
like you said, it
it's
was good
effective.
effects, really good effects, especially for the '70s when you know they probably didn't have a whole hell of a lot to work with. I mean, it was probably a lot of makeup and some process.
For
whatever.
sure.
But,
Sorry, I stepped on you a bit there, though, Tammy. You were saying something.
Yo, Adrian, it's me, Rocky.
Apologies.
That was your moment.
Yo, Adrian.
Yeah.
Actually, I like the line when she asked for a phone, and he said,
Yo,
"Who
I'll
are you
call
gonna
you
call?"
brother. if
My
that's the
brother is
problem.
like, "I'll call you, bro. I'll call you brother." Before he opens up the window, he goes, "Yo, Paulie, your sister's with me."
Yo, Paulie, your sister's with me. I'll call you back later. See ya.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. That was
Yeah,
just
that's great
absolutely
too.
hilarious.
I love that. Brandon, favorite scene or moment?
Well, to me, I like I like how it kind of they connect together. How he starts out his initial workout, how he drinks the raw egg, and then you can see he's like
5
barely
raw
making it
eggs.
up the steps, and then of course later on where he actually does make it up the steps. It's just such a cool, iconic scene. Especially if you tailor them both together, it just is a pretty cool thing seeing that progression of start to finish.
Oh, for sure. Dave?
My favorite moment in this this entire film is when Burgess Meredith, his character, shows up at Rocky's door, and he wants to become his manager, and he Rocky gets very emotional. He's like, "Where were you 10 years ago? Why didn't you, whatever? Just, even though I know he like ran down the stairs and like bonded with him like right after he like got upset for some reason, just the fact that this guy has been on his butt because he's been a bum, that to me underlies like because they really have a good relationship, afterwards.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, great humanized relationship there, and I mean, Mickey is just such a so like pretty much everybody except Carl Weathers, sadly. I mean, everybody got Oscar nods, but I don't think anybody won. But it and deserved. I think everyone does such an amazing job. And let's see, Jake, did you have a favorite scene or a favorite line of dialogue or moment? If you're there, yeah, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Whew.
It's tough, I know.
Yeah, a little bit.
I'm kind of racking my brain right now.
Same.
Because I
Yeah.
could just say the entire movie because again, it's just classic moment after classic moment.
It is one of those rare movies where I
Right.
love just about every single frame of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. There are very few. I mean, it's kind of hard to beat that iconic montage or training montage. I mean, that's probably the scene that everyone comes back to, even if they've never seen the movie, they know of it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a classic moment. And I would say as well, most of the scenes with Carl Weathers, I just think he's great in the movie, and
He really is.
I did enjoy. I
Really,
enjoyed the
really
initial scene where they choose him again, mainly because of the nickname, and it's just like, man, you don't know what you're in for. Just say
Yeah. Well,
it's kind of fun.
the
Yeah.
monster movie line's probably that could be my favorite line in the whole thing, just because like
Oh yeah.
as a kid who grew up with the
Yeah.
Universal monster movies, I was like, yes, they get it,
Yeah.
So that endeared me to the movie immediately, because that's
And
where my brain went too.
and I
I
know
always went more to like King Kong or Godzilla, but I feel you.
Well, that too, yeah.
Sorry, Jake.
also I can relate to that because like I admit it's sort of a game I play at the library where I'll see a book and I'll be like, damn, that would be a great band name, or that would be a great
Yeah.
horror. Or I love it when I find a kid's book and I'm like, that would be such a great horror movie title or something. It's like,
For sure.
so
Dan
I
coined a
could,
good one earlier with Meat Clowns. That
That's
definitely
right.
needs
yes,
to be a
yes,
thing.
that I could see that. I could see that, but it's like. Like earlier today, I was looking at a book that had, it was this Christmas book, and it had a Santa, and you pushed a button at the end, and it did this weird little, supposed to be a holiday theme, but it was very quiet, and my coworker's like, that was spooky. But it's like the final line, it's got Santa's is something like he cries out, Merry Christmas to all, whatever. And then the final line is a separate sentence that says, and he pushed the button. And I'm like, that would be such a great horror movie.
Love it.
So that moment in the film definitely resonated with me, yeah, because I feel that. I get it.
Or like a sample in a song, and then it's followed by the sound of a nuclear explosion.
Yeah.
Right.
Dustin, favorite moment or line? If you're still there.
Who'd you
I'm
say?
still here. I'm thinking. Damn it.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, no, it's
still haven't
hard.
came
It's
up
really
with one.
hard.
Like the movie has so much like
what do you
pretty
leave
much
out?
every
Really,
scene like is like high quality. It's
really split.
I guess I'm gonna be kind of lame and go with the payoff, like the final battle.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
good stuff. Did you say, Mo?
I'm inclined to almost agree with Dustin. I mean, it is such a good payoff to the whole movie and the emotional climax with Adrian and everything. I love the way the movie just ends too. It doesn't fucking overstay its welcome after the final battle. It's just like, all right, you got what you came here for. Get the fuck out of the cinema.
Yeah.
Come back and watch it again.
Well,
so it's like a perfect ending.
They
to this kind of a
specifically
movie.
froze on that exact frame because Stallone was like, that was it. That was the ultimate moment of elation for Rocky as a character because he got his life is at the pinnacle right there.
If they drug it out, or I'm sure they had to have some idea that they could do a sequel to this at the time.
Well, the ending was way different originally. Originally, Rocky was going to throw the fight, and then that changed, and then it was going to be him and Adrian in the empty arena walking away hand in hand, which actually is the image on the poster, amusingly enough. And but it was not needed, and also he wanted to end it off on that apex, and wisely so too.
So I'm inclined to go with that one as like the biggest moment in the movie because it's obvious. But there's just so many little things that I love throughout the film. I think, though, if I had to really zero in on my overall favorite moment in the whole movie, it's probably that time, the first time that Rocky comes and visits Adrian at the pet store.
Yeah.
It's just so sweet. And, I think it happen shortly after he is doing the loan shark stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it really is a good juxtaposition of Rocky's character,
For sure.
Because especially if you're watching this the first time in a cinema in the 70s or whatever, you could believe, like you said, a big theme of the movie is the outward appearance betraying what's underneath or whatever. You could believe that Rocky would be a legitimate thumb breaker just looking at the dude, but then it shows that there's a little more to him. And then when you find out that he has this crush on this super deceptively hot pet store girl, it's just the cutest thing in the whole movie to me. I think is that first pet store, that pet store visit.
Yeah,
Which
go ahead.
It does remind of another great line. Are you by any chance working a pet shop?
Mm-hmm.
But that's always the scene for whenever I watch this, and it was true both times that I the first time, when I watched it for this, and then when I attempted the nipple watch. That's the scene of the movie where like the nostalgia really kicks into full gear for me too. It's like, all right, I'm chilling watching Rocky. Like we're underway now,
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'll always have an emotional attachment to that scene. Anyways.
Well, another good bit of subtext is actually the second pet shop scene where he was talking about like, you need someone to walk you home, because a lot of creeps around here. You can always tell a creep. And he's trying so hard not to be that, but he also just sort of feels like he's not getting anywhere. And, you can see that on his face. It's just, that's really powerful stuff. Again, subtext. And Tammy, you said Yo Adrian was your favorite line. Was that also your favorite scene as well?
Well, kind of, because he does the Yo Adrian where I like the scene where he throws the turkey out and
that's good
It's
stuff.
so good.
and he's just sitting there chowing on that that piece that he took, and he's trying to tell him to go talk to Adrian, and he's just chopping away on the thing and hitting him
You
with
want
it
some
and
turkey?
everything. So
I feel like there's like turkey flying out of his mouth during the rest of his
Right,
lines.
he's just like-
He does offer Rocky something too. He's like, "You hungry?"
Yeah.
You
It
want
looked
some?
like a good leg that he fucking tore off that.
Oh, he
bird.
Yeah,
did. He did.
That's
He
in
did
my
make
top
sense.
5 favorite lines. You hungry, Rock? And there's another underrated line he has, which is you keep doing what you're doing. I know all about these things. I love that.
So I guess I do agree with the other scenes that everybody else has said too.
Yeah.
Those are great, but I just got a kick out of that one. It was just and the whole time he's trying to get him to go talk to Adrian.
I'm gonna tell everybody I've thought about it. I'm a little surprised nobody brought up it's technically kind of 2 scenes in one, and kind of one leads to the other. I think it's the one that contextualizes everything, which is Rocky gets up in the middle of the night, goes to the arena, runs into Jerkins, the promoter, and Mr. Jerkins, their poster's wrong. What do you mean? We're the white pants with the red stripe. Doesn't really matter, does it? I'm sure you're gonna give us a great show. And that's when he does the I can't beat him, and just not just another bum from the neighborhood, that whole thing. I mean, that really is what contextualizes the entire movie, because it could have been just about the boxing or just about winning or just about this and that. And it really is something much deeper than that. And I feel like the quietness of the scene just before it, and the fact that, Jerkins is not being mean about it at all, but he's also clearly not taking Rocky seriously. And that really just helps it to sink in that, he's probably not going to win, and that's not really what it's about. It's about a lot, more than that. So, I felt like that just focused the movie on a much, much, much deeper level than anything else did. And that's also where you see the performances shine really, really nicely as well. Well, I mean, I guess that's a pretty darn good, first stab at Rocky anyway. I mean, again, you could talk about the movie for like 5 hours at least.
Well, I'll do my
Yeah,
favorite.
go ahead. I thought you did already, but go ahead.
No. But yeah. Well, the line, like I already said, when he yelled out the window to
Yeah.
Polly, is my favorite line. But my favorite scene is actually right out, when Paulie was hitting the baseball bat, he's like flying around, all pissed. And then when she got up and just started screaming at him, you're like, well, I don't owe you nothing. I cook for you, I clean for you, I take care of you, and and just that whole scene there with her finally like having enough of his bullshit with her, and her just standing up for herself and not just being the shy girl. She finally help come out of her shell. I mean, he did help pull her out of her shell,
Yeah, for
in a
sure.
way, but it also made her see that
He's more of a yank than a
she
pull.
has some she has worth, and he's always putting her down, and she's been taking care of her, and she's not a loser, and he needs to basically respect her. I mean, it's just, she didn't say those words, but what she meant, and it was just a powerful moment for her as a character, and it really showed how much she had grown through the movie.
Well, and underrated line just before that. Hey, it's cold outside, Paulie. I don't know what it is. That always kind of stuck with me.
Come on, you're fucking killing the whole buzz here, bro. Fair play mentioning that one, Carl. Actually, that's probably my runner-up if I had, if there was one to.
Yeah, well, I mean, as soon as I saw that scene again, when I was watching it earlier, I was like, wow, that is an awesome scene. I said, at this moment, that's my favorite scene, and it just stayed. So all this time, I already knew my favorite scene, just waiting to say it.
Oh, it's excellent stuff. Well, another underrated line is the took her to the zoo, and then the funny part is
I was gonna mention that it was really funny in the second movie.
Yeah, they
when
actually
he proposes. Go to the zoo. He proposes at the zoo,
which is great.
I was like, wow, he really does take her at the zoo.
Yeah, great way to pay that off.
Holy shit! I've never even thought of that in my entire life.
I chuckled when he took her to the zoo. I was like, because
he takes the advice.
He takes her to the zoo and asks her to marry him.
And she says yes right there. And as a pivot point to 3, who's there in attendance? A tiger. And, because he still has the eye of the tiger at that point,
And of course, his jacket, he has the tiger as well. So
exactly. So it all ties together,
Yeah.
in ways you don't necessarily expect. But, I mean, pretty good. Man, everybody had a lot to say, which is awesome. Like good engagement on this one. But that's Rocky. I mean, it deserves it. I think we can all agree it deserves its reputation as as a beloved film and a Best Picture winner, and so influential.
A milestone of sports cinema. I mean, it's
and cinema in general.
I do think though
the
best line might be in the second movie though.
And we're gonna get to that momentarily.
I know.
Yep. Pretty economic coverage too, with 8 people doing the first Rocky movie. Like you said, this easily could have been twice the length. So
for sure, there's so much to dive into.
The Aussies say,
Yeah, I mean, if we had 5 hours to spare, they could dissect every little line, every scene. I mean, there's just so much to dive into. But
well, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We definitely have another film to talk about. But let us know down in the comments what you thought of our discussion. And hopefully we'll see you on that other channel. Because tonight we are on Delusions of Grandeur. So everyone say good night.
Good night.
Good night,
everyone.
Join us for Rocky 2.
As our distinguished friend has already said.
Exactly.